Lord, grant us the grace to recognize the blessings we once overlooked, the courage to face the truths we ran from, and the wisdom to cherish the second chances you place before us. Amen. Welcome back to Mr. Comfort Stories, your home of comfort, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. If you are returning, thank you for your loyalty. If you are new here, you are most welcome. Please, before we begin, click the like button and drop a comment. It helps YouTube share this story with more people who need it. And if you believe in forgiveness and second chances, type heart in the comments below. Now, let's dive into tonight's unforgettable tale. The chandeliers above the grand ballroom glittered like frozen stars, their glow spilling across polished marble floors. Guests in tailored tuxedos and elegant gowns mingled with practiced smiles, the soft hum of laughter and string music filling the air. This was no ordinary evening. It was New York's most exclusive charity gala, a night where fortunes were flaunted and reputations cemented. At the center of it all stood Ethan Caldwell, tall, broad-shouldered, every inch of his midnight black tuxedo pressed to perfection. He carried himself with the calm assurance of a man who knew both power and wealth. He had been called ruthless in the boardroom, admired for his keen mind, envied for his empire. To the world, Ethan was untouchable, the polished face of success itself. But beneath the smooth exterior, a hollow ache gnawed. The smiles he exchanged felt empty, the laughter rehearsed. As champagne flutes clinked around him, he quietly wrestled with the truth he rarely admitted. The life he built had come at a cost he couldn't repay. Still, he played his part, shaking hands with senators, nodding at CEOs, offering practice congratulations, until the music swelled. His eyes, wandering without intention, flicked toward the ballroom entrance. Guests streamed in, glittering like jewels, and then, suddenly, the air in his lungs fled. She walked in. Amara. Her name tore through his chest like a forgotten melody. The woman he had once loved beyond reason, the woman he let slip away when ambition blinded him. Her beauty hadn't faded, if anything, it had ripened into something more commanding. An emerald gown swept the floor, her shoulders proud, her chin lifted in quiet confidence. Her presence drew subtle whispers, heads turning to catch a glimpse of her grace. But Ethan's heart didn't stop because of Amara alone. It was the boy. A child no older than 7 walked hand in hand with her. His features struck Ethan with the force of thunder. That jawline, softened by youth, but unmistakably his. Those slate blue eyes, his exact reflection. The stubborn chin, the posture, even the way the boy scanned the room with measured curiosity. It was as if Ethan was staring at a smaller, innocent version of himself. The crystal glass in Ethan's hand nearly slipped. The music dulled. Conversations blurred into meaningless murmurs. He could see nothing, hear nothing, feel nothing but the boy. His boy. Ethan Caldwell, the man who had mastered every room he entered, froze. Ethan's feet moved before his mind caught up. He excused himself from a senator's conversation with a stiff nod, his pulse hammering so loud it drowned the music. Every step toward her felt heavier than the last. The gala lights blurred at the edges, his gaze locked only on the woman he once called his forever and the boy who looked like his mirror. Amara felt it too. Though she held her chin high and her gown swept gracefully across the marble floor, her heart thudded unevenly as her eyes found his. For years she had prepared for this moment, or convinced herself it would never come. Yet here it was, staring back at her in the form of a man she once loved and the son he did not know. When Ethan finally reached her, the crowd seemed to vanish. His breath came shallow, disbelief carved deep into every line of his face. "Amara," he said, the name catching like gravel in his throat. "Ethan," she replied, her tone steady, but her fingers tightened around her son's small hand. For a moment, time stood still. The boy glanced between them, sensing the tension without understanding it. His wide eyes carried a question he could not yet put into words. Ethan's voice broke, low and raw. "Is he—" He could not finish. Amara straightened, her gaze unwavering. "This is Malik, my son." The words landed like a hammer on his chest. Ethan's knees nearly buckled, though he fought to keep his composure. Every inch of the boy screamed truth, his truth. "Ours?" Ethan managed, his voice thick with equal parts shock and aching hope. Her lips pressed into a firm line. "Yes, ours." The air between them grew taut, so heavy it drew whispers from the curious onlookers. Amara's pride would not allow her son to become spectacle, so with a polite but brittle smile she said, "We need somewhere private." Without hesitation, Ethan led them toward a side corridor, away from the glittering eyes of New York's elite. The heavy ballroom doors closed behind them, muting the music and chatter, leaving only silence and the echo of their footsteps. The hall stretched wide, lined with gilded mirrors and velvet chairs. Malik slipped free of Amara's hand, wandering curiously toward a painting on the wall. The moment his small footsteps carried him a safe distance, Ethan turned sharply to face her. "Why?" His voice was low, but carried the tremor of a storm barely contained. "Why didn't you tell me?" Amara's shoulders lifted as though bracing against a blow. Her eyes glistened but did not waver. "Because I wasn't going to beg you to choose us. I had already done that as a wife, Ethan. I refused to do it as a mother." The words sliced deeper than any boardroom betrayal he had ever endured. Ethan staggered back, guilt pouring through him in ways he had never known. He thought he had lost her to neglect, to his empire. He never realized he had also lost years with a son he didn't know existed. His throat tightened as he turned toward Malik. The boy's small fingers traced the edge of the frame with curiosity, his profile so achingly familiar. Ethan whispered, barely audible, "He's mine." Amara's reply was calm but sharp as glass. "He's ours, but he only knows me. That was by choice, my choice. Because Malik deserved peace, not empty promises." Ethan's jaw trembled as he pressed a hand against the wall for support. He had faced mergers worth billions, political rivals, hostile investors, but never had he felt so powerless. The silence pressed in, heavy and undeniable. Malik turned, his innocent voice cutting through the tension. "Mama, who is this man?" Ethan froze at the boy's words. He had weathered financial storms, stared down hostile shareholders, and negotiated deals with steel in his veins, but nothing in his life had prepared him for this. Malik's wide eyes studied him with innocent curiosity, not fear. The boy tilted his head the way Ethan used to when weighing a decision, waiting for an answer. Ethan crouched slowly, lowering himself to the child's level. His voice, usually commanding, now trembled. I'm someone who's very glad to meet you." The boy's brows knitted. "Are you Mama's friend?" Before Ethan could answer, Amara stepped forward, her tone soft but firm. "Yes, Malik. An old friend." Her eyes locked on Ethan's, a warning threaded in the glance. Ethan swallowed hard, but his gaze never left the boy. He wanted to say the truth, to shout it, but the word father felt too fragile to place on such tender ground without earning it first. Malik considered the reply and gave a small shrug, his attention shifting back to the painting. For him, it was just another moment in an evening full of strangers. But for Ethan, it was the shattering of his world. When Malik's footsteps faded down the corridor, Amara's composure cracked. She crossed her arms, her voice sharp with restrained fury. "You don't get to just walk in after years of silence and claim him." Ethan rose slowly, his chest tight. "I never knew." "You didn't ask," she shot back. eyes blazing. "You didn't notice when I stopped waiting at the door. You didn't notice when I left. You didn't notice me, Ethan. Why would you have noticed a child?" The sting of her words left him breathless. He opened his mouth, but only silence came out. For years he had justified the loss of his marriage as the cost of ambition. Now he realized the cost had been far higher, a living, breathing legacy he had been blind to. Amara's voice dropped lower, trembling but resolute. "I raised him without you because I refused to let Malik grow up on broken promises. He deserves more than a father who's only half present." Ethan's eyes burned. "I don't want to be half of anything anymore." His hand pressed over his chest as if steadying the ache. "I want to be his father. I want to be there, fully, always." Her chin lifted. "Words. You've always had the right words. But can you show me? Can you keep showing up when the cameras aren't on you, when there's no deal to win?" "I will," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking, raw and stripped of pride. "I can't undo the years I lost, Amara, but I will not lose another day." For the first time in years, she saw something different in his face. Not arrogance, not excuses, but vulnerability. The man who once chose boardrooms over birthdays was standing before her, trembling, stripped of everything but his desperate truth. Amara blinked, steadying herself. She wanted to trust, but scars ran deep. "Prove it. Don't tell me. Prove it." From down the corridor, Malik's voice rang out, light and unknowing. "Mama, can we go home now?" Amara turned, her gown sweeping softly as she walked to her son. Ethan stood frozen in the silence left behind, his chest heaving, his hands trembling. The confrontation had ended, but the war for his family had only just begun. The heavy doors of the ballroom muffled the music as Amara led Malik away, her grip gentle but certain. Ethan stood rooted to the corridor, his chest heaving like he had just run a marathon. For the first time in years, he wasn't the millionaire everyone envied. He was a man stripped bare, staring at the truth he never saw coming. He pressed a trembling hand against his face, the memory of Malik's eyes burning into him. It wasn't denial anymore, it wasn't even shock. It was something far deeper, heavier, the realization that his son had been walking this earth for years, laughing, crying, growing, all without him. When Ethan finally returned to the ballroom, the lights felt harsh, the laughter hollow. Every crystal chandelier mocked him. Every polished surface reflected a stranger. Conversations resumed around him. People congratulated him on things he no longer cared about. But Ethan's thoughts were trapped in that corridor, replaying Amara's words. "Prove it. Don't tell me. Prove it." At the edge of the ballroom, Amara guided Malik toward the exit. Ethan's chest tightened. He could let them go, pretend the night never happened. That would be easier, safer. But the thought of losing Malik, of never hearing the boys laugh again, of never earning the right to be called father, carved him open. He excused himself once more, weaving through the glittering crowd, ignoring the puzzled stares. His hand clenched into a fist at his side, not out of anger, but determination. "Not this time," he muttered under his breath. When Amara reached for her coat at the check stand, Ethan was there. His voice was steady now, anchored in something stronger than pride. "Amara, I'm not asking for your forgiveness tonight. I know I don't deserve it. I'm asking for a chance to show him, to show both of you, that I'm not the man I was." She turned slowly, her eyes narrowing, her jaw tight. "Ethan, you can't undo 7 years in one night." "I know," he admitted. His shoulders sagged, but his gaze didn't waver. "But I can start tonight. I can start by being here, by not running." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Malik tugged at her gown, looking up with innocent confusion. "Mama, is he coming with us?" The question pierced her resolve. She hesitated, glancing at Ethan, then back at her son. "Not tonight, baby, but maybe one day." Malik nodded, accepting the answer the way children often do, simply, without judgment. He wrapped his small arms around her waist, his head against her side. Ethan swallowed hard, the lump in his throat nearly choking him. That single exchange, that single hope of maybe one day, was enough to ignite a fire in him. He wasn't leaving this to fate. He wasn't letting them slip away again. As the doors opened and Amara stepped into the cool night with Malik, Ethan stayed behind, staring after them until they disappeared into the city lights. His chest ached, but for the first time in years it wasn't from emptiness. It was from longing, raw and unshakable. He whispered to himself as if making a vow, "I will prove it. I will earn them back." And now, dear viewer, the story truly begins. What happens when a man who thought he had everything is confronted by the one thing he never knew he lost? Stay with us, because this tale will test forgiveness, second chances, and the true meaning of family. But before we continue, I need your help. Smash that like button if you believe love can heal even the deepest wounds. Drop a comment below. Would you forgive someone who kept your child a secret? And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Comfort Stories for more unforgettable tales. Your support helps this channel grow and lets us keep sharing life's most powerful lessons. The spring air in Atlanta carried a sweetness that Ethan Caldwell rarely noticed. His trips south were usually a blur of meetings, conferences, and networking dinners, each event blending into the next. He had learned to treat cities like stages, places to display his ambition, impress investors, and build alliances. That day was no different, at least at first. The downtown hotel where he attended a networking luncheon gleamed with polished brass fixtures and white tablecloths. The ballroom hummed with the low murmur of conversation and the clinking of glasses. Men and women in sharp suits moved from table to table, exchanging business cards like currency. Ethan, still in his early 30s at the time, had already begun to carve a name for himself in finance. Tall and broad-shouldered, with the calm precision of someone trained in both prep school etiquette and Ivy League ambition, he carried himself with quiet confidence. His dark hair, still untouched by the silver strands that would later frame him, was neatly parted. His eyes, sharp, assessing, the color of storm clouds, studied the room as though scanning for the most lucrative opportunities. He was speaking with a fellow executive about potential real estate expansions when something unexpected tugged at his attention. A laugh. Not the restrained chuckle he was used to hearing at these polished events, but a full, warm laugh that lifted above the chatter like sunlight breaking through clouds. He turned, scanning the room, and saw her. Amara Johnson was weaving between tables with a tray of hors d'oeuvres balanced gracefully in her hands. She wore a simple black catering uniform, but there was nothing simple about the way she carried herself. Her skin glowed with a deep mahogany richness that caught the soft hotel lighting, and her long black hair, pulled into a low twist at the nape of her neck, framed her face with understated elegance. She wasn't laughing at anyone in particular. It was simply the way she responded when a guest made a clumsy joke while reaching for food. But to Ethan, the sound pierced through the monotony of the room. It wasn't polished or performative. It was real. When she stopped at his table, their eyes met. For just a second, the calculated rhythm of his world faltered. "Thank you," he said as he reached for a crab cake. Amara tilted her head, her lips curving into a playful half-smile. "You don't strike me as the crab cake type." Her voice carried a soft southern lilt, each word rolling smooth as honey, but with a touch of teasing edge. Ethan raised an eyebrow, momentarily taken aback. People rarely spoke to him that way, not in business circles. "Oh? What type do I strike you as?" She smirked, shifting the tray with practiced ease. "Filet mignon, medium rare, with a glass of wine you probably can't pronounce." His laugh came out more genuine than he intended, loosening something in his chest. "You're not wrong. Didn't think so." She offered the tray, and though he usually avoided appetizers at these events, he picked one up just to prolong the exchange. The food barely registered on his tongue. What stayed with him was the spark in her eyes. He found himself lingering, asking how long she had been working with the catering company, though he usually had little interest in small talk outside business. She answered politely but briefly. This wasn't her full-time job. She was helping a friend cover a large event. It wasn't where she wanted to be forever. Something about the way she said it, with quiet conviction, told Ethan that her world stretched far beyond passing trays in hotel ballrooms. Later, while colleagues shifted conversations to stock forecasts and real estate ventures, Ethan's gaze kept drifting back to her. She moved through the room with ease, greeting people warmly, laughing without self-consciousness, balancing trays as though they weighed nothing. When the luncheon wound down, Ethan surprised himself by lingering near the catering station. Normally, he would already be headed to the airport or tucked into a car with his assistant updating his schedule. Instead, he found himself asking her about Atlanta, about what she did outside of work. Amara studied him for a beat, as though deciding whether to indulge the curiosity of a man in a sharp suit who looked far too at home in boardrooms. Finally, she answered, her words painting small but vivid portraits, summers filled with cookouts at Piedmont Park, church choir rehearsals where laughter spilled louder than the hymns, her grandmother's sweet potato pie that no one in the family could quite replicate. As she spoke, Ethan felt something shift inside him. Her stories were filled with color and texture, a world that felt alive compared to the sterile environments he was used to. He realized he was leaning closer, wanting to hear more. When she asked about him, he gave the practiced biography he always offered. Born in Connecticut, educated at private schools, Ivy League, family trips to Cape Cod. But for the first time, speaking of those things felt hollow. Her eyes didn't light up at his resume. Instead, she asked, "Did you like it?" He faltered. Few people ever asked him that. They asked what he accomplished, not how he felt. "I suppose I did," he admitted, though even as the words left his lips, he questioned them. She smiled knowingly. "Suppose? Doesn't sound too convincing." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're very direct. Life's too short to dance around the truth," she replied simply, adjusting her tray before moving on. That night, back in his hotel suite, Ethan thought about her more than he cared to admit. The laugh, the warmth, the sharp honesty wrapped in charm. He told himself it was just a fleeting distraction, but distractions didn't usually follow him into his dreams. The next morning, when his assistant suggested a packed day of meetings before his flight home, Ethan surprised himself. "Reschedule the evening," he said. "I need some time to myself." In reality, he found himself strolling through Centennial Olympic Park, remembering how Amara had mentioned the fountains there. The park was alive with families, couples, and children darting between the splash of water. It wasn't his usual environment, yet he felt oddly at ease. And just when he thought he was being ridiculous, when he was about to leave, he saw her again. She was out of uniform now, in jeans and a simple blouse, carrying a paper bag from a local bakery. She spotted him almost immediately, raising a brow with mock suspicion. "Are you following me, Mr. Filet Mignon?" He laughed, holding up his hands. "Pure coincidence. Unless you're about to tell me this park is your territory and I need a permit to walk through." She grinned. "Depends. You planning on stealing any sweet potato pies around here?" They ended up walking together, talking more freely than they had the day before. He learned about her degree in sociology, about her desire to work with community programs in Atlanta, about her love for gospel music and her stubborn refusal to let go of her grandmother's recipes. She learned about his upbringing, not the resume this time, but the reality. The cold dinners where affection was measured in expectations, the holidays that felt more like board meetings. For the first time, Ethan spoke not as a polished businessman, but as a man who sometimes wondered what it meant to truly live. As the sun dipped low, painting the fountains in orange and pink, Amara paused. "I should get going," she said softly. "Can I see you again?" he asked, the words out before he could stop them. She studied him for a long moment. "Maybe, but only if you promise to eat more than crab cakes next time." He grinned, feeling lighter than he had in years. Deal. The following weeks unfolded in a way Ethan had not anticipated. Normally, after a business trip, his attention snapped back to quarterly projections, expansion strategies, and endless meetings in New York. But something about Amara lingered in his thoughts, weaving its way into the spaces between deals and deadlines. He found himself inventing reasons to return to Atlanta. Officially, he told his colleagues he was exploring investment opportunities in the South. Unofficially, his heart had its own agenda. The next time he visited, he called Amara. She was cautious at first. Her world was far from his, and she knew it. He was polished boardrooms. She was neighborhood cookouts. He carried the weight of tailored suits. She carried the rhythm of gospel choirs and laughter-filled porches. But despite the differences, she agreed to meet him. Perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps because she had felt that spark too. They met at a small cafe tucked away on Auburn Avenue. The cafe smelled of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon rolls, the kind of place where regulars lingered for hours. Amara slid into the booth across from him, wearing a simple sundress that made her beauty impossible to ignore. "You look radiant," Ethan said, surprising himself with the honesty in his voice. Amara arched a brow, stirring her tea. "You're not so bad yourself, Mr. New York." He chuckled. "It's Ethan. Just Ethan." Her lips quirked. "All right, just Ethan. What brings you back this time? Another business deal?" "Maybe," he admitted. "But mostly, I wanted to see you." She held his gaze, her eyes sharp yet soft. "Careful. I'm not a stopover on your way to success." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I'm here." That day stretched into hours. They talked about everything: music, books, faith, family. She teased him about never having tasted collard greens made properly, and he confessed he had never been to a live gospel concert. She invited him to her church's choir performance the following weekend, half joking, half testing if he would actually show. He showed. Ethan slipped into the wooden pew, feeling out of place among the swaying congregation, but the moment the choir began, something inside him shifted. Amara's voice rose among the harmonies, clear and strong. He had sat through countless operas, orchestras, and fine performances in New York, but nothing stirred him the way her voice did that night. It wasn't just music, it was soul. Afterward, they walked beneath the streetlights outside the church, the summer air warm and fragrant with magnolias. "So," she asked playfully, "first time hearing real music?" He smiled, hands in his pockets. "First time hearing something that makes me feel like I'm alive." Her laughter was soft, but her eyes glimmered with something deeper. From there, their connection grew like roots intertwining. Ethan invited her to dinners at fine restaurants, and though she admired the gesture, she often countered with invitations of her own: backyard barbecues, neighborhood block parties, Sunday dinners where cousins and uncles filled the air with noise and stories. At first, Ethan felt awkward. He didn't know the slang her cousins used or the rhythm of spades at the card table. He stood out in his polished shoes and crisp shirts. But Amara made space for him, guiding him gently into her world. Slowly, he loosened, laughing when he lost a hand of cards, rolling up his sleeves to help flip burgers on the grill. One summer afternoon, Amara's family hosted a cookout at Piedmont Park. Music pulsed from a set of speakers, children chased one another across the grass, and the smell of ribs and cornbread filled the air. Amara tugged Ethan toward the dance circle, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Don't tell me you've never two-stepped," she teased. He shook his head, a little embarrassed. "Business school didn't cover that. Good thing you've got me." She placed his hands at her waist, guiding him gently into the rhythm. At first he stumbled, his movements stiff. But the warmth of her laughter and the easy sway of her body against his loosened him. Soon they were moving together, not perfectly, but in sync enough to draw cheers from her cousins. "You're not hopeless," she said afterward, breathless from laughter. "I'll take that as high praise," he replied. In those moments, Ethan found pieces of himself he had long forgotten. The boy who once dreamed freely before ambition tightened its grip. The man who longed for connection beyond contracts and profit margins. In return, Ethan introduced Amara to his world, though cautiously. He took her to rooftop dinners overlooking the New York skyline, art exhibits where wine flowed as freely as conversation. She adapted easily, her natural charm disarming even his most intimidating colleagues. But afterward, when they slipped away from the crowd, she often teased him. "Your friends talk too much about money," she said one night as they walked along the Hudson. "That's all they know," he admitted. "And what do you know?" He stopped, considering her question. For once, he didn't have a ready answer, but he wanted to find it, with her. Their differences became a dance of their own. She taught him to savor slow Sunday mornings. He introduced her to the thrill of spontaneous weekend trips. She pulled him into conversations about community and justice, reminding him that life was bigger than stock reports. He showed her how determination could build dreams beyond limitations. Still, at the core, it was their hearts that blended. He admired her resilience, the way she carried her family's legacy with pride. She admired his vulnerability when he dared to share it, glimpses of a man who longed for more than success. One evening, as they strolled through Centennial Olympic Park once more, Ethan paused by the fountains where children played. The lights shimmered off the water, casting a gentle glow. He reached for her hand, hesitant but sincere. "Amara," he said softly, "I've been in rooms filled with power, but nothing compares to this. To you." She squeezed his hand, her eyes tender. "Don't just say it, Ethan. Show it." "I will," he promised. And in that moment, with the Atlanta skyline stretching above them, Ethan knew this was no passing romance. This was the beginning of something that would change him forever. The day came when Ethan realized he could no longer keep Amara hidden within the corners of his travels and weekends. Their bond had deepened far beyond curiosity. He wanted her woven into every part of his life, though he didn't yet understand what it would cost. It began with Amara inviting him to Sunday dinner at her mother's home in Atlanta. Ethan had heard her stories of those evenings, family crammed into a modest house, voices overlapping in friendly argument, laughter that shook the walls, the scent of soul food carrying through the air. Still, he was unprepared for the whirlwind that greeted him the moment he stepped through the door. "Yo, this him?" a cousin shouted from the living room, already grinning. "That's him," Amara confirmed with a half smile, linking her arm through Ethan's as though to steady him. Her mother, a regal woman with eyes sharp as truth, came forward. "Ethan Caldwell," she said slowly, as though testing the sound of his name. "You got the look of a man who's searching. I hope you know what you're searching for, standing here with my daughter." Ethan swallowed, caught off guard, then bowed his head slightly. "I'm searching for something real, and I found it in her." The table that night was crowded with platters of fried chicken, collard greens, candied yams, and cornbread so buttery it crumbled at the touch. Ethan sat stiff at first, unsure of where to place his hands, fumbling through his first game of spades with her cousins, who teased him relentlessly when he misplayed a card. But Amara's laughter, light, teasing, but proud, loosened him. By dessert, he was laughing too, though awkwardly, at his own mistakes. Her uncle nudged him and said, "For a New York boy, you're not the worst we've seen." Her mother watched him quietly through it all. When Amara went to fetch pie, she leaned closer to Ethan. "You've got ambition stamped all over you, son. Don't let it swallow my daughter. She's not a footnote in your story. She deserves the headline." The words seared into him. He nodded solemnly. "She will always be the headline." Amara's mother said nothing more, only gave a slight nod, but in her silence, Ethan felt both warning and blessing. Weeks later, it was Ethan's turn. He brought Amara to Connecticut to meet his family. The Caldwell estate sat on sprawling land, all manicured gardens and stone facades. Inside, the atmosphere was colder than the Johnson household had ever been. His father asked curt questions about Amara's work. His mother smiled politely, her eyes scanning Amara's dress as though assessing its worth. The dinner table gleamed with crystal and silver, but conversation was brittle. Amara held herself with poise, answering questions with calm clarity. She spoke of her degree, of her volunteer work, of her vision for community programs. Her warmth, however, seemed to bounce off the polished walls without ever sinking in. Later that evening, Ethan's mother pulled him aside. "She's charming," she said carefully, though her tone carried more judgment than praise. "But is this practical, Ethan? Your world is different." "My world," he replied firmly, "is changing." For the first time, Ethan didn't bend to his family's expectations. He chose Amara, even if it meant standing in uncomfortable silence with the people who had raised him. Months passed, and the bond between them only deepened. They traveled together, long drives through the Georgia countryside, quiet weekends in New York. He cherished the way she turned even the simplest meal into laughter, how she reminded him to pause when ambition tried to pull him forward too quickly. One evening, back at her mother's porch, Ethan felt the moment had come. The same porch swing where they had spent countless nights talking, the same spot where Amara had leaned against him, as though the world could not touch them. The cicadas hummed, the air was thick with the scent of jasmine, and Amara sat beside him, her head tilted against the fading orange sky. Ethan's hand trembled as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Amara," he said, voice rough with nerves, "I've built a life chasing numbers, but none of it has ever made me feel what I feel with you. You are the one constant I never knew I needed. Marry me. Make forever real." Her eyes filled instantly, tears spilling before she could speak. She covered her mouth, nodding furiously even before words came. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes." The porch lights glowed softly as he slipped the ring onto her finger, his own hands shaking. Their kiss tasted of salt from her tears, but also of promise. Unshakable, tender, full of hope. Their wedding was a fusion of two worlds. Held in a lush garden just outside Atlanta, the ceremony blended elegance with soul. Ethan stood in a tailored navy suit, his storm blue eyes fixed only on Amara. She walked down the aisle in lace, her veil catching the sunlight, a gospel choir's gentle harmonies floating through the air. His family sat stiffly in the front row, but even they could not deny the beauty of the moment. Amara's family filled the garden with laughter, applause, and songs of praise. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed her with a desperation that promised forever. For a time, forever seemed possible. Their receptions spilled into the night, a collision of champagne toasts and soul music, where Ethan's colleagues clinked glasses and Amara's cousins pulled him onto the dance floor until he was breathless with laughter. As the stars stretched overhead, Amara leaned against him and whispered, "We'll make this work, no matter what worlds try to pull us apart." Ethan kissed her forehead, believing every word. "We already have. Marriage, in its first seasons, felt like the sunrise after a long night. Ethan and Amara stepped into it with hearts full of hope and hands tightly clasped, determined to prove that love could bridge worlds as different as theirs. Their first home together was a brownstone apartment in Brooklyn. It was far humbler than Ethan's colleagues expected for a man of his growing stature, but Amara loved it. The exposed brick walls, creaky wooden floors and narrow staircase carried a sense of history. To her, it felt alive. To him, it was the first place that ever truly felt like a home. On their first night after returning from their honeymoon in Jamaica, Amara unpacked boxes while humming softly to herself. Ethan wandered the rooms, still in disbelief that this was theirs. "You know," he said, leaning against the doorway, "I could have bought us a penthouse in Manhattan, something with glass walls and a view of the skyline." Amara grinned without looking up. "And where would I plant my herbs, huh? On a glass balcony 200 feet in the air." He laughed, crossing to her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Herbs? That's your big dream?" "Yes," she teased. "Fresh basil, mint, rosemary. It's the little things, Ethan. You'll learn." He kissed the curve of her neck, whispering, "Then teach me." And she did. In those early days, they built a rhythm. Mornings often began with Amara brewing coffee while Ethan skimmed the news, though he quickly learned to put the paper down when she challenged him to actually talk, not just grunt responses. Evenings were theirs alone, dinners cooked together, laughter spilling through the kitchen when he botched a recipe, late-night walks through their neighborhood with hands entwined. Their love was both tender and playful. On rainy afternoons, she would pull him onto the couch, insisting on watching old movies. "Life can't just be boardrooms and contracts," she'd say, tucking her feet beneath her. "You need popcorn, Ethan, and laughter." He discovered he needed both, and more. Weekends often found them exploring the city. Amara loved the open-air markets where vendors sold everything from handmade jewelry to spices that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. Ethan trailed behind her, carrying bags with mock complaints, though secretly he adored watching her face light up at each new discovery. Once, as she tried on a hand-woven scarf, Ethan leaned close and whispered, "You're the most beautiful thing in this market, and it isn't even close." Amara rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. "Flattery won't stop me from buying it." "Good," he replied. "I'll buy it for you." Their travels also grew in scope. Ethan whisked her away to Paris one spring, where they strolled hand in hand along the Seine. Amara introduced him to her world of Atlanta summers, barbecues, and family reunions that lasted late into the night. He learned to play spades without fumbling. She learned to tolerate business galas, though she teased him mercilessly afterward about how stiff everyone seemed. The blending of their lives wasn't seamless, but it was rich. At the heart of it all was respect. Ethan admired Amara's passion for her work in community centers, her drive to uplift children and families who lacked the privileges he had taken for granted. He often found himself humbled by her ability to give so much of herself, even when she came home exhausted. "You don't have to carry the whole world, Amara," he told her one night as she prepared flyers for a youth program. She looked up, her eyes warm but steady. "Maybe not, but I can carry a piece. If everyone carried a piece, the weight wouldn't be so heavy." Her words stayed with him, reshaping his understanding of purpose. Amara, in turn, admired Ethan's discipline and ambition. She saw the man beneath the tuxedo, the boy who longed for approval but had learned to mask it behind confidence. She noticed the way his eyes softened when he listened to her sing, the way he paused when she reached for his hand. She cherished the vulnerability he rarely showed anyone else. Their intimacy deepened too, not just in the physical sense, but in the unspoken ways they cared for one another. A touch across the dinner table, a whispered joke in crowded rooms, the comfort of falling asleep with his arm around her waist. For their first anniversary, Ethan surprised Amara with a weekend trip to Martha's Vineyard. The island was quiet that time of year, the beaches nearly empty. On one evening walk, as the sun bled pink into the horizon, Amara stopped and turned to him. "You know what I love most about us?" she asked. "What's that?" "That even when the world feels too big, we still find our way back here, to this, to each other." He kissed her, tasting the truth of her words. Those years were golden. They built a home of laughter, compromise, and shared dreams. They hosted dinner parties where Amara's collard greens sat beside Ethan's carefully chosen wines. They painted walls together, argued playfully over furniture, and filled their brownstone with framed photographs of adventures near and far. Friends who visited often commented on the warmth of their space. "You two make it look so easy," one said. But Ethan and Amara knew it wasn't ease, it was work, deliberate and steady. Still, in those early years, the work felt light. Their love was strong enough to make the challenges feel small. On quiet nights, Amara would curl into his chest and whisper, "Forever still feels possible, doesn't it?" And Ethan, his hands stroking her hair, always replied, "Forever is ours." At first, the shift was subtle. Ethan's calendar filled with more late-night meetings. His phone buzzed constantly during dinners, and his eyes wandered to glowing screens, even when Amara was speaking. In the beginning, she brushed it off. "It's just a busy season," he would say, kissing her cheek before rushing out the door. She told herself it was true, that empires required long hours and sacrifices. But busy became routine, and routine slowly began to wear down the joy that once wrapped around their days like sunlight. One evening, Amara prepared his favorite meal, baked salmon with her grandmother's sweet potato pie for dessert. She set the table with candles, dimming the lights to create a softness in their brownstone apartment. She wore the scarf he had bought her in Paris, letting it drape around her shoulders. But the clock ticked. 7 passed, then 8. By 9 she was sitting alone, staring at the untouched plates. At 9:30, the door finally opened. Ethan entered, still in his suit, tie loosened, exhaustion etched into his face. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, dropping his briefcase. "The investors wouldn't let me leave." Amara forced a small smile, though her chest ached. "Dinner's cold." He sighed, loosening his cufflinks. "Let's reheat it." But when she rose to do so, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, muttered something about a client in London, and stepped into the hallway to take the call. By the time he returned, Amara had packed the food away. She sat at the table, arms folded, eyes heavy with disappointment. "This can't keep happening, Ethan." He rubbed his temples. "I know, just a little longer. Once this deal closes, I'll slow down." She shook her head. "You've said that before. How many more deals until I get my husband back?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The distance widened in quiet ways too. Ethan missed a family barbecue in Atlanta because of a last-minute flight. He forgot about the community fundraiser Amara had spent months organizing. At first, she made excuses for him, to her family, to herself, but excuses couldn't soothe the sting of his absence. One night, after she returned from the youth center exhausted but fulfilled, she found him asleep on the couch, laptop still open on his chest. She stood over him for a long time, torn between brushing the hair from his forehead and shaking him awake, to demand why their marriage had become an afterthought. Instead, she covered him with a blanket and whispered to the quiet room, "I miss you." Their arguments became sharper. "You're building an empire," she told him one night, tears glistening in her eyes, "but you're tearing us down." "I'm doing this for us," he shot back, voice rising. "For our future. Our future doesn't exist if you're never here in the present." Her words cut deep, but his pride bristled. "Do you want me to throw everything away? The business, the deals, the reputation I've built?" "I want you," she whispered. "Not your empire. You—" But he didn't hear it then, not truly. One winter, their anniversary arrived. Amara reserved a quiet table at a small Italian restaurant they both loved. She wore a red dress he once said made her look unforgettable. She waited, sipping water, watching the door. An hour passed. Finally, her phone rang. "Amara," Ethan's voice came, rushed and apologetic. "I'm so sorry. I'm stuck at the office. I'll make it up to you." She ended the call without a word, tears streaking her cheeks as the waiter silently cleared the second plate. The breaking point came one stormy evening. The rain lashed against their windows as Amara sat on the couch, her hands clenched in her lap. Ethan entered late again, his suit soaked, his phone buzzing with another call. She stood, blocking his path. "Enough, Ethan." He blinked, startled by the fire in her eyes. "What do you mean? I can't keep waiting for you to choose us. I won't raise a family on broken promises. If you can't be here, then maybe—" Her voice cracked, but she steadied it. "Maybe I shouldn't be here either." His chest tightened. "You're saying you'd leave?" Tears streamed freely now. "I'm saying you already left. Every night you'd choose the office over me. I just can't do this alone anymore." The silence was deafening. Ethan reached for her, but she stepped back. Her suitcase, already packed, waited by the door. "Amara," he whispered, broken. She lifted her chin, her face etched with both sorrow and love. "I will always care for you, but I need more than a promise you never keep." And with that, she walked out into the storm, the door closing softly behind her. Ethan stood frozen in the empty apartment, the echoes of their laughter and dreams fading into shadows. For the first time, he realized that ambition had cost him the only treasure he could never buy back. The chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars above the ballroom, their light scattering across gowns, tuxedos, and glasses filled with champagne. The annual Atlanta Philanthropy Gala was the kind of event that demanded presence from anyone who wanted to be seen as powerful or relevant. For Ethan Caldwell, attendance wasn't optional. He stood near the bar, his black tuxedo tailored to perfection, his tie knotted just so, his cufflinks gleaming with discreet opulence. To anyone looking on, he was the image of control, tall, composed, handsome, in that effortless way people associated with men who had built empires. His smile was polite, his handshake firm, his posture immaculate. But behind the mask, a restlessness gnawed at him. He lifted his glass of sparkling water, though he hadn't taken a sip in 10 minutes. His eyes drifted across the room, cataloguing faces, nodding when he caught someone's gaze. Old acquaintances slapped his back with jovial laughter. Young entrepreneurs whispered eagerly in hopes of being noticed. Women in sequined gowns brushed past with flirtatious glances, but Ethan's mind was far away. It had been years since Amara left, years of pouring himself into work, expanding his company into markets he once only dreamed about. On paper, his life had never looked more impressive. His name appeared in magazines, his net worth climbed, and his reputation as a formidable CEO only solidified. But none of it filled the quiet spaces of his nights. None of it erased the memory of a stormy evening when Amara walked out with her suitcase, her voice trembling as she said she couldn't keep waiting for him to choose them. He carried her absence like a scar beneath his tuxedo, invisible to the world but impossible to ignore. As the gala unfolded around him, speeches droned on from the stage. Philanthropists boasted of their donations, politicians made polished promises. Ethan clapped at the right moments, nodded when appropriate, but his mind wandered. The ballroom felt suffocating. He had stood in rooms like this for decades, each one glittering with wealth, yet none had ever felt so empty. The laughter ringing out around him was brittle, the compliments hollow. He wondered how many others were playing roles, how many hid their own restlessness behind champagne smiles. When the chairman of the gala approached, Ethan straightened his shoulders, slipping into the mask of attentiveness. "Ethan, good to see you," the man boomed, gripping his hand. "Your contribution this year has everyone talking. The Caldwell Foundation continues to set the standard." "Happy to support the cause," Ethan replied smoothly. The words rolled off his tongue, polished, automatic. The man chuckled. "Always so modest. You should take a bow. Half the scholarships we're announcing tonight wouldn't exist without you." Ethan inclined his head, murmured his thanks, and excused himself. Inside, a hollowness yawned wide. What good were scholarships and foundations if the boy he once could have raised didn't even know his name? He moved toward the balcony for air. The city lights stretched out in the distance, Atlanta's skyline glowing against the night sky. He loosened his tie, inhaling deeply. For a moment, away from the glitter and chatter, he allowed his shoulders to slump. The emptiness was unbearable tonight. He thought of how different these evenings had felt when Amara was by his side. She had never blended seamlessly into the world of crystal chandeliers and boardroom egos, but she brought something better: authenticity. She teased him for rehearsing his speeches, laughed at the stiffness of the room, and always found someone to talk to who wasn't on the guest list. With her beside him, these nights had felt human. Without her, they were suffocating. A colleague found him on the balcony. "There you are, Caldwell. Always disappearing. The investors want a word." Ethan pulled the mask back on with practiced ease. "Of course." He followed the man inside, adjusting his tie again, the mask slipping back into place. But deep inside, restlessness churned. Tonight felt different. He couldn't explain why, but the air buzzed with something he couldn't shake, as if the night itself was holding its breath. He didn't know that within moments, the life he had carefully controlled would crack wide open. The satin gown lay across her bed like a question she didn't know how to answer. Amara sat at the edge of the mattress, her fingers tracing the fabric absent-mindedly. It shimmered under the warm light of her bedroom, elegant and commanding, a dress fit for a gala. And yet she couldn't bring herself to slip into it. The invitation had arrived weeks earlier, embossed with gold lettering, the kind of event she once would have shrugged off as Ethan's world, not hers. She'd been invited because of her work as a psychiatrist and her growing reputation for leading community programs that bridged mental health with underserved neighborhoods in Atlanta. The board wanted diversity, passion, and authenticity on display. She was all three. Still, she hesitated. The gala was more than a stage for philanthropy, it was a stage for ghosts. Ethan would be there. She was certain of it. He always was. The thought of seeing him again, after all these years, made her chest tighten with conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, longing, and something else she refused to name. In the next room, Malik's laughter drifted down the hall. Her 7-year-old son was sprawled on the floor with building blocks, chattering to himself as he constructed a crooked tower. His presence was both her strength and her hesitation. She stood and walked toward him, leaning in the doorway to watch. His eyes lit up when he spotted her. "Look, Mama, it's a castle," he announced proudly, though the structure leaned dangerously to one side. "It's perfect," she said warmly, kneeling beside him. She kissed his cheek and let her hand linger on his curls. Malik was the reason she had survived the years after Ethan, the reason she rebuilt her life from the ashes of heartbreak. Raising him alone hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every sacrifice. His laughter filled the silence Ethan had left behind. His questions reminded her to keep learning, and his hugs stitched together the wounds in her heart. But the thought of bringing him to the gala unsettled her. Her sister, Alicia, had urged her earlier that week. "You've worked too hard to hide in the shadows, Amara. You deserve to be seen. And Malik, he deserves to see his mama celebrated." Amara had shaken her head. "And if Ethan sees him?" "Then he sees him," Alicia replied matter-of-factly. You can't keep running from the truth forever." Amara had no response then. Even now, hours before the event, the debate raged inside her. Part of her wanted to skip it altogether. To stay home, cook dinner with Malik, watch a movie, and avoid the sharp stab of seeing Ethan's face again. She could almost hear the echo of his apologies, the ones that had once sounded sincere but never changed his choices. But another part of her whispered differently. This wasn't about Ethan. This was about her work, her accomplishments, the impact she was making. She had fought too hard to let fear dictate her steps. Why should she forfeit her place in the room because of him? Malik tugged on her sleeve, snapping her out of thought. "Mama, are we going somewhere tonight?" She smoothed his hair, searching his innocent eyes. "Maybe," she said softly. "Would you like to go somewhere fancy?" His grin widened. "With dessert?" She laughed, her heart softening. "Yes, baby. With dessert." She rose and returned to the bedroom. The gown still waited. She touched it again, inhaling deeply. The fabric was smooth, cool beneath her fingertips, like a promise waiting to be claimed. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped into it. The satin hugged her frame, its deep emerald shade flattering her skin. She slipped on earrings, applied subtle makeup, and studied her reflection. The woman staring back wasn't the heartbroken wife who had walked away years ago. She was stronger now, steadier. She had built a life without Ethan. Malik's voice piped up from the hall. "Mama, you look like a queen." Her throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart." She bent to help him into a little suit she had bought just for the evening. He twirled around proudly, his bow tie crooked but his smile flawless. As she guided him to the mirror, their reflections stood side by side, mother and son, a legacy of resilience. She saw Ethan in Malik's eyes, in the tilt of his head, in the stubborn line of his jaw. It made her ache, but it also reminded her of the truth she carried. Their love had not been entirely lost. A part of it lived, laughing, breathing, growing every day. Her chest tightened again. If Ethan saw Malik tonight, there would be no denying it. The resemblance was too strong. And once that door opened, it could never be closed. She whispered a prayer beneath her breath, her words soft and trembling. "Lord, give me strength. Let me walk in truth, no matter what it costs." Taking Malik's hand, she straightened her shoulders and led him toward the waiting night. The gala was not just another event. It was the threshold of revelation. The gala was in full swing. The orchestra swelled with jazz standards, mingling with the clinking of glasses and the rise and fall of polite laughter. Waiters glided between tables with trays of champagne, their movements as choreographed as the dancers who twirled across the polished floor. Ethan stood with a cluster of investors, his posture impeccable, his conversation effortless. To anyone watching, he seemed engaged, nodding as a colleague detailed a new venture in Chicago. But his mind remained elsewhere, restless, searching. Then, in an instant, the room shifted. It wasn't the orchestra or the speeches from the stage. It was the sound of laughter, warm and familiar, threading through the din like a melody he hadn't heard in years, but still remembered by heart. His eyes moved across the ballroom, and there she was, Amara. She stood near the grand staircase, her emerald gown catching the chandelier's light. It clung to her in all the right ways, regal and effortless. Her hair framed her face in soft waves, and though her expression was calm, Ethan knew the strength it took for her to walk into this world again. For a moment he forgot to breathe. The chatter around him blurred. All he could see was her, radiant and untouchable, the same woman who once filled his brownstone with laughter, the same woman who walked away when his ambition left no space for love. But it wasn't just Amara who stole his breath. Beside her stood a boy. He couldn't have been more than 7, dressed in a small suit, his bow tie slightly crooked. His hand was clasped firmly in Amara's, his eyes wide as he took in the grandeur of the room. And those eyes, Ethan knew them, storm cloud grey, his eyes. The boy turned his head, and Ethan's chest constricted. The resemblance was undeniable. The sharp line of his jaw, the tilt of his chin, even the way he shifted his weight onto one foot with the quiet confidence that mirrored Ethan himself. The glass in his hand trembled. He barely noticed when champagne spilled onto his cuff. His colleague asked a question, but Ethan didn't hear. He was already moving, his steps slow but unshakable, as though drawn by an invisible thread. Each stride carried him closer to the truth he had never imagined, the truth he had been blind to for years. Amara felt it before she saw him, that pull in the air, the way a room seemed to shift when Ethan entered. Her spine stiffened, her grip tightening around Malik's hand. She turned her head, and there he was, cutting through the crowd, his gaze locked on her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. Their eyes collided, and time fractured. For Ethan, it was like being slammed back into the past and hurled into the future all at once. Memories of porch swings and whispered promises collided with the undeniable sight of the boy at her side. For Amara, it was a storm she had braced for but hoped never to face. The collision of the life she built and the man who had once broken her heart. Malik tugged at her hand, whispering, "Mama, who's that man?" Her throat tightened. She couldn't answer, not here, not yet. Ethan stopped just a few feet away. His voice, usually smooth and commanding, cracked under the weight of disbelief. "Amara." His eyes flicked to Malik, then back to her. "Who is he?" The question wasn't casual. It wasn't polite curiosity. It was raw, trembling, desperate. The ballroom began to quiet. Whispers rose, heads turned. Guests sensed something unscripted, something real, and the Gala's polished surface started to ripple. Amara's jaw tightened, her voice low but firm. Not here, but Ethan couldn't contain it. His gaze remained fixed on Malik, his chest rising and falling as though he had run a marathon. He saw himself in the boy's features, in the tilt of his smile, as Malik looked curiously between them. The world he had built, the empire, the reputation, the mask, crumbled in that moment. All that remained was the haunting, breathtaking truth. He was looking at his son. A hush fell over the ballroom, as if the chandeliers themselves had dimmed to catch the moment. Conversations faltered, laughter dissolved, and eyes turned toward the three figures frozen near the staircase, Ethan Caldwell, Amara Johnson, and the boy who mirrored Ethan so completely that whispers began before Ethan could even form words. "Is that?" someone murmured. "Looks just like him," another replied. Ethan barely heard the crowd. His pulse roared in his ears, drowning out the music. All he could see was Malik's curious face, his small hand still clasped tightly in Amara's. The boy looked back at him with wide, unguarded eyes. Ethan had been studied and analyzed by competitors and journalists, but never had a gaze disarmed him like this. Innocent, searching, familiar. Amara shifted slightly, angling her body between them, shielding her son from the growing sea of eyes. Her own chest rose and fell quickly, her gown shimmering with each breath. She could feel the weight of the room pressing down, the judgment, the curiosity, the sharp edge of gossip already forming. "Not here," she said again, firmer this time, her voice cutting low but steady. But the crowd wasn't interested in boundaries. A ripple of whispers traveled like fire through dry brush. Glasses clinked as guests craned their necks for a better view. The orchestra faltered before recovering weakly, their music unable to mask the tension that now electrified the room. Ethan's longtime business associate, Marcus, stepped forward with a nervous chuckle. "Ethan, my friend, why don't we—" "Not now," Ethan snapped, his eyes never leaving Amara and Malik. Marcus froze, startled. He had seen Ethan angry in boardrooms, but never like this, never raw, never shaken. From across the room, reporters for the society columns raised their phones, pretending to check messages while discreetly taking photos. The Caldwell name was too big, the resemblance too striking for them to ignore. Amara caught the movement out of the corner of her eye. Her stomach twisted. Malik was no scandal, no headline, no curiosity for strangers to dissect. He was her son. Their son. She bent down quickly, her voice gentle for him alone. "Stay close, sweetheart." Malik nodded, squeezing her hand. His voice carried with innocent clarity, "Mama, why is everyone staring?" The words landed like a stone dropped in water, sending ripples through the silence. Ethan's chest clenched. He wanted to answer, to claim the boy, to silence the room with the truth. But his throat tightened. His voice lost somewhere between pride and grief. Finally, Amara lifted her chin, her voice calm but commanding. "Because Gala's love drama, baby. Let's not give them any more tonight." With that, she turned to guide Malik toward the exit. But Ethan stepped forward, his hand reaching out instinctively. Amara. Her name echoed too loudly, carrying over the softened music. The whispers grew louder, sharper, feeding off the tension. Guests leaned closer, hungry for the scene unfolding. It was Marcus who moved again, attempting to save face for his friend. He raised his voice, forcing a laugh. "Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the evening. Mr. Caldwell will join us shortly." But his words did little to disperse the attention. The air remained heavy, the crowd's eyes fixed on Ethan, Amara, and Malik. Ethan's mask, once so reliable, had cracked wide open. His polished exterior slipped with every breath. His eyes were glassy, his jaw clenched, his composure crumbling. For years he had been untouchable in public, the man who never faltered. Tonight, the world saw a different Ethan, vulnerable, shaken, undone. And Amara, poised, unyielding, stood as his contrast. Though her heart raced, she straightened her shoulders, refusing to let the ballroom see her break. She gathered Malik close, guiding him past the crowd with dignity. Every step she took felt like defiance, as if she were saying, "This is my child, my life, my choice." But Ethan couldn't let her walk away, not again, not without answers, not without the truth. The orchestra swelled, desperate to reclaim the night, but the damage was done. The Gala had fractured, and everyone knew it. Amara guided Malik through the side corridor of the hotel, her steps swift but steady, the sound of her heels echoing against marble. The noise of the ballroom dulled behind them, but the weight of dozens of eyes still clung to her like static. She tightened her grip on Malik's hand, her free hand clutching her clutch against her side. "Are we leaving, Mama?" Malik asked, his voice soft, uncertain. "Yes, baby," she whispered. "We're leaving soon." But before they reached the exit, Ethan caught up. "Amara." His voice cracked against the quiet hallway, breaking through the distance she was desperate to keep. She stopped, her back stiffening. Slowly she turned. He stood a few feet away, breathless, his tuxedo immaculate but his face undone. The mask he wore in the ballroom was gone. In its place was a man stripped raw, his storm-grey eyes searching hers, his hands trembling at his sides. "Please," he said, his voice rough. "Just don't walk away. Not yet." Malik looked up at her, confused, then glanced at Ethan again. The boy tilted his head, the exact same way Ethan did when trying to understand a puzzle. The resemblance cut Amara deeper than any whispered rumor ever could. She lowered her voice, firm but sharp. "This isn't the place." "Then make a place," Ethan said quickly, his desperation spilling through. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Her heart pounded. She wanted to say no, to keep walking, to shield her son from the storm about to break. But she saw Malik's curious gaze, felt the question pressing on him as much as it pressed on Ethan. The truth was already clawing its way to the surface. She nodded once, curtly. 5 minutes. They slipped into a side lounge, empty except for velvet chairs and a dim chandelier. Malik sat on a sofa, his small hands fiddling with his bow tie. Amara stood in front of him protectively, her emerald gown shimmering as she squared herself toward Ethan. The air between them felt heavy, like the pause before thunder. Ethan's voice came low, trembling. "Amara, is he mine?" The words cracked through the silence, each syllable weighted with years of absence and regret. Amara's breath caught. For years she had prepared for this moment, rehearsed how she might respond if he ever came back. But no rehearsal could match the reality of his voice, raw and breaking. She glanced at Malik, then back at Ethan. Her jaw tightened. What difference would it make now? "Every difference," Ethan said fiercely, stepping forward. His eyes shone with unshed tears. "Because if he's mine, I've already missed 7 years of his life. 7 years I can never get back, and if he's mine, I will not miss another day." Amara's chest ached. She had prayed he would never force this confrontation, prayed she could shield Malik from the complicated truth. But looking at Ethan, the anguish carved into his face, the vulnerability that stripped him bare, she knew the moment had arrived. "Yes," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but the word was clear. "He's yours." Ethan's breath hitched like a man struck. His knees nearly buckled as he pressed a hand against the back of a chair for support. His eyes darted to Malik, then back to Amara, then to Malik again, as though he needed to see it confirmed in every detail. "My God," he murmured. "My son." Malik blinked, confused. "Mama?" Amara knelt in front of him, her hands gently cupping his cheeks. Her eyes glistened as she said softly, "Baby, this is your father." The boy studied Ethan curiously, his small brows furrowing. "My father?" Ethan crouched down slowly, his hands shaking as he rested them on his knees. His storm-grey eyes brimmed with tears. "Yes, I didn't know, Malik, but if you'll let me, I want to know you now. I want to be your dad." The boy tilted his head, studying him, the innocence in his gaze piercing Ethan's soul. "Do you like castles?" Ethan blinked, startled. "Castles," Malik nodded solemnly. "Because I'm building one, and only people who like castles can come inside." Ethan's lips trembled into a shaky smile. A tear slid down his cheek as he whispered, "Then I love castles." Malik studied him another beat, then shrugged. "Okay." It was simple, almost too simple, but to Ethan it was everything. A doorway cracked open, a chance. He lowered his head, fighting back sobs, his heart swelling with both grief for lost years and hope for what could come. Amara watched, her heart torn. This was the moment she had feared, but also the moment she couldn't deny her son. She saw Ethan differently now, not just as the man who once broke her heart, but as a father who finally understood what he stood to lose. Her voice softened. "Ethan, words aren't enough. You'll have to prove it. To him, to me." He nodded vigorously, his tears unashamed. "I will, whatever it takes." The silence that followed was heavy, but not hopeless. For the first time in years, the three of them stood in the same space, the truth laid bare. And now, dear listener, the story burns even brighter. Ethan has learned the truth, but can a man who lost everything truly win back the family he abandoned? If you believe everyone deserves a second chance, drop a heart in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if the scene moved you. And hit subscribe so you won't miss how this story unfolds. Because what comes next will test forgiveness, trust, and the courage to love again. The gala ended in whispers and flashes of cameras, but for Ethan, the world beyond that dim lounge blurred into silence. He could still feel Malik's small eyes studying him, still hear the word Amara had finally spoken. Yes, he's yours. For days afterward, Ethan moved through life like a man half present. Meetings dragged, numbers swam on reports, conversations slipped past him without meaning. The only thing sharp, The only thing alive was the memory of his son. He didn't call Amara right away. He knew better than to storm in demanding space he hadn't earned. Instead, he began quietly, asking Marcus to clear his calendar of unnecessary obligations, shifting responsibilities, letting go of late-night meetings that once defined him. It startled his colleagues. "You're pulling back?" one asked, incredulous. Ethan only nodded. For once, empire building felt secondary. Finally, he reached out. His message to Amara was simple. "I don't want to disrupt his life, but please, let me show up, even just once." She didn't reply immediately. Hours stretched, then a day, then another. Each minute was agony, but Ethan forced himself to wait. When her response finally came, it was curt, cautious. "Saturday, 2 p.m, the park near my mother's. We'll be there. Don't be late." Ethan read the message a dozen times. Not forgiveness, not trust, but an opening. Saturday arrived bright and unseasonably warm. Ethan stood at the edge of the park, his hands in his pockets, his heart pounding harder than it had before billion-dollar deals. Families sprawled across blankets, children ran through patches of grass, and laughter carried on the breeze. He spotted them near the swings, Amara, graceful even in jeans and a simple blouse, and Malik, pumping his small legs furiously to swing higher. Ethan's breath caught. For a moment he stayed frozen, watching. Malik's laughter carried across the air, so familiar it made Ethan ache. Amara stood close, her hands folded, her gaze flicking toward Ethan even before he began walking over. "You're on time," she said flatly when he approached. "I told you I would be," he replied. His voice was low, careful, each word chosen as though the wrong one might shatter the fragile ground they stood on. Malik slowed his swing, spotting Ethan, his eyes lit with recognition. "Hey, it's the castle man." Ethan's lips curved into a trembling smile. "That's me." Amara arched a brow. "Castle man?" Malik grinned proudly. "He said he likes castles, so he can come inside." Ethan's chest tightened. He crouched to meet the boy's eyes. "If you'll still have me—" Malik shrugged, matter of fact. "We'll see." It was such a small phrase, but to Ethan it felt like a key placed into his trembling hands. They started simple. Malik showed Ethan his crooked block towers, explaining with great seriousness why dragons needed secret doors to escape. Ethan listened intently, nodding as though the boy's designs rivaled architectural plans. "Looks like you've got an engineer's brain," Ethan said. Malik puffed his chest. "Or a king's," Ethan laughed, the sound breaking free after years of restraint. "Even better." But as much as Ethan longed to sweep Malik into his arms, he restrained himself. He let the boy set the pace. He let him chatter, let him laugh, let him lead. Amara watched closely, her expression unreadable. Every protective instinct in her bristled, but she also noticed the way Ethan crouched instead of towering, the way he listened instead of directing. When Malik dashed off to chase a ball, she finally spoke. "This doesn't erase the years." "I know," Ethan said softly. He turned toward her, his storm-grey eyes raw. "But it can be the start of the next ones." She studied him, her jaw tight. "One visit won't prove anything. Children notice patterns. If you show up, then disappear again." "I won't," he cut in, his voice steady. "Not this time." She didn't reply, but something in her gaze flickered. Skepticism laced with the faintest trace of hope. The afternoon stretched into small, ordinary moments. Ethan pushed Malik on the swings, cheered when he climbed the jungle gym, laughed when he declared victory in a race only he had been competing in. Each moment felt monumental to Ethan, though to Malik it was simply play. When it was time to leave, Malik tugged at his sleeve. "Will you come back?" Ethan swallowed hard. "If your mom says yes, then absolutely." Malik looked at Amara expectantly. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. The boy grinned. "Okay, castle man. Next time bring snacks." Ethan laughed through the ache in his throat. "You got it." As Amara led Malik away, Ethan stood still, watching them go. His chest felt fuller than it had in years. The road ahead was long, but for the first time he believed he could walk it. The following Saturday came with a nervous energy that settled deep in Ethan's chest. He stood outside the modest community library in the West End of Chicago, clutching a bag of Malik's favorite snacks, a mix of fruit chews and those bright blue corn chips he'd raved about last time. Ethan had never stepped foot in this neighborhood before, but today he wasn't a CEO. He wasn't a man of suits and structure. Today he was just a man trying to be a father. Amara's voice had been firm on the phone. "You want to spend time with him? He's got a library reading hour at noon. Be there. No excuses." He had replied with nothing but a quiet, "I'll be there." Inside the children's section, bright murals of animals and flying books colored the walls. Ethan spotted Malik immediately. He was sitting cross-legged on a carpet, surrounded by other children, listening wide-eyed to a librarian reading Dragons Love Tacos. Amara sat on the bench along the wall, arms folded, brows lifted when Ethan walked in. She gave him a small nod, not of welcome, but permission. Ethan eased down beside her, his towering frame awkward on the low bench. "Hi," he whispered. Amara didn't look at him. "You made it. I told you I would." Malik glanced over and beamed. "Castle man!" The librarian paused, eyes flicking to Ethan. He raised a sheepish hand. "Sorry." After story time, the children scattered to coloring tables. Malik pulled Ethan by the hand toward a corner with dinosaur puzzles. "You like dinosaurs?" Ethan asked, trying to sound casual. Malik shrugged. "They're cool. I like how they stomp." Ethan grinned. "Me too, especially T-Rex. But Triceratops is pretty strong too." Malik narrowed his eyes. "You know dinosaurs?" "Know them? I had a whole collection when I was your age that seemed to win him over." Malik dumped the puzzle pieces on the floor and began sorting them. Ethan knelt beside him, trying to help. The pieces didn't fit easily, and neither did the rhythm of their interaction. Ethan reached too fast. "This one goes—" "No," Malik said sharply. "That's his tail. It goes here." Ethan chuckled, backing off. "Bossy, huh? I'm the Dino King," Malik replied matter-of-factly. Ethan nodded solemnly. "Then I stand corrected, Your Majesty." It was clumsy, but Malik laughed, the sound breaking the ice just a little more. They spent over an hour on the floor. Ethan was amazed at how Malik's mind worked, how he built whole stories around the puzzle characters, how he gave each dinosaur a name and a silly voice. "You're good at this," Ethan said as they neared the last piece. "I play a lot." Malik paused, thoughtful. "Mama says I have an imagination like the sky." Ethan's heart clenched. "She's right." He glanced over to Amara, who pretended to scroll through her phone, but her eyes flicked up every few seconds, watching. Guarded, observing. Later, as they packed up the puzzle, Malik asked, "Did you bring snacks?" Ethan smiled and pulled out the bag. Malik tore into it with joy. "Mama don't let me have too much of these." Ethan leaned in conspiratorially. "It's our secret." Amara immediately raised a brow. "No secrets." "Right," Ethan said quickly. "No secrets. Just minor snack negotiations." Malik giggled. Walking them to the car, Ethan asked Malik, "Would you want to do this again next week?" Malik tilted his head. "Will there be snacks again?" "If you want. And can we go somewhere with water?" Ethan looked at Amara, who hesitated. "There's a lake park not far from here." "Then it's a date," Ethan said, then quickly corrected. "I mean, an outing." "With the Dino King," Malik smirked. "Don't forget." Ethan watched them drive away. the reflection of Malik's hand waving through the rear window warming him more than the spring sun. The next Saturday they met at Lakeview Trail. Malik arrived wearing a backpack full of plastic action figures. "I brought my warriors," he declared, racing ahead. Ethan laughed, jogging to keep up. They walked the trail, tossing rocks, spotting ducks, and inventing wild stories about swamp monsters and underwater castles. But in between the laughter, there were silences, not uncomfortable, just spaces Ethan wasn't sure how to fill. "Do you like school?" he asked once. Malik shrugged. "Sometimes. I get bored. What's your favorite subject?" "Recess," Ethan chuckled. "Smart choice. You talk different," Malik said suddenly. Ethan blinked. "Different how? You use big words." "I guess I do," Ethan admitted. "Want me to stop?" Malik considered. "Nah. It makes you sound like a king." At the lake's edge, they sat on a rock. Ethan helped Malik open a juice pouch, and for a while they watched the water ripple. "Castle man? Yeah? Why don't you live with us?" The question hit like a brick. Ethan didn't answer right away. He glanced over and saw Amara in the distance, pretending to check her watch but clearly listening. Ethan met Malik's eyes. "That's a really big question." Malik waited. "I didn't know," Ethan said finally. "About you. I didn't know I had a son." Malik frowned. "Mama said you left." Ethan swallowed. "We were both hurt. We both made mistakes. But I'm here now, and I don't want to go away again." Malik studied him, like he was trying to decide if Ethan was telling the truth. Then he nodded once and took another sip of juice. The walk back was quieter. Malik held Ethan's hand, loosely, but without resistance. At one point, a dog barked nearby and startled him. Without thinking, he tucked closer to Ethan's side. It was a fleeting moment, but Ethan felt it. A step forward. Back at the parking lot, Amara approached. "He seemed to enjoy today," she said cautiously. "I did too." Amara looked tired, but her voice was softer than before. "Just don't mess this up." "I won't," Ethan promised. "You've done an amazing job with him, Amara. I'm not trying to take over. I'm just trying to belong." For a heartbeat, something passed between them. Not romantic, but human. Shared history, shared future. That night, alone in his penthouse, Ethan stared at the drawings Malik had made. Lopsided dinosaurs, a stick-figure family with M for Malik, M for Mama, and now a new addition, E with a crown. He ran a hand down his face, overwhelmed. This was only the beginning, but beginnings, he'd learned, were sacred. Amara had learned to live with walls. They weren't visible, but they were strong, built brick by brick out of heartbreak and disappointment. Ethan's sudden reappearance threatened to chip at them, and she hated how fragile they felt whenever she watched him with Malik. It had been 3 weeks since the library and the lake. Each Saturday, Ethan had shown up. He was early, never distracted by phone calls, never trying to impress anyone but Malik. That reliability unsettled Amara more than absence ever had, because consistency bred hope, and hope was dangerous. On a Thursday evening, Amara sat at her kitchen table in their small but warm apartment, grading case notes for her counseling clients. Malik colored beside her, humming. His backpack leaned against the chair leg, and a paper crown sat crooked on his curls. "Mama," Malik said suddenly, "is Castleman coming Saturday?" "Yes," she said cautiously. "Good." He colored harder, adding flames to a dragon. "I like him." Amara's pencil stilled. She glanced at her son's small hands gripping the crayon, his innocent joy. She wanted that joy to last. But she also remembered nights when Ethan stayed out chasing deals, the times she sat alone wondering if she mattered. Could a man like that really change? She forced herself back to her papers. "Don't get too attached, baby. People don't always keep promises." Malik looked up, his dark eyes steady. "He's kept them so far." Her throat tightened. Children noticed more than adults gave them credit for. Saturday arrived, and Amara resolved to test Ethan. If he wanted to prove himself, let him face the truth of her doubt. When Ethan pulled up to their building, Malik dashed forward with excitement. "Castle man!" Ethan knelt and hugged him quickly, then rose to meet Amara's gaze. "Afternoon. We'll walk today," Amara said, folding her arms. "No cars, no treats, just time, fine by me." They strolled through the neighborhood streets, Malik skipping ahead. Ethan kept glancing at Amara, sensing the unspoken weight in the air. Finally she said it. "Why now, Ethan?" He blinked. "What do you mean? You've been gone for years. You didn't call, you didn't check. Now suddenly you want to play Father of the Year." Her voice was low but sharp. "I didn't know about him," Ethan replied, steady but strained. "If I had—" "You did know about me," she cut in. "You knew the woman you left behind. Don't pretend ignorance erases choices." He flinched. Her words pierced, but they were true. "I was broken," he admitted. "My ambition blinded me. I thought love would slow me down, make me weak. I see now it made me stronger. I was just too arrogant to realize it." Amara stopped walking, forcing him to face her. "Malik is not your second chance to rewrite history. He's my son. I raised him. I carried him through every fever, every night terror, every scraped knee. If you step in now, you'd better be prepared to stay." "I know," Ethan said, voice rough. "That's why I'm here. I don't want to hover in the shadows. I want to stand beside you both." Her eyes burned. She wanted to believe him. But belief had cost her too much before. Later, at the playground, Malik tugged Ethan toward the slide. Amara sat on the bench, arms crossed. A woman she knew from church, Denise, slid beside her. "That your boy's daddy?" Denise asked in a whisper. Amara stiffened. "He's trying to be—" Denise gave a low hum. "Careful. Men come back with sweet words. But can they stand the long nights, the hard days?" Amara didn't answer. She only watched Ethan climb the slide ladder with Malik, laughing as the boy squealed down into his arms. The sight tugged at something she had buried, the memory of Ethan's laughter years ago, how it once lit up her world. Could a man really resurrect that? That evening, after Ethan dropped them off, Amara lingered by the door. "Thank you," she said stiffly. Ethan nodded. "For trusting me with today." "I haven't trusted you," she said sharply. "Not yet. Don't confuse access with trust." Ethan met her eyes, unflinching. "Then I'll keep showing up until you can—" She hated the way her chest clenched at his words. She hated the tiny spark of warmth his persistence kindled. When she shut the door, Malik raced to his room, clutching the paper crown Ethan had fixed when it tore. Amara leaned against the wall, whispering to herself, "Don't let him in." Not again. But the truth was harder to deny. Ethan was already at the threshold. The question came on a quiet Sunday evening, when the sky outside Amara's apartment glowed with the last blush of sunset. Malik sat cross-legged on the living room rug, crayons scattered around him, sketching his castles with bold strokes. Ethan had stopped by after church, his tie loosened, jacket draped on the couch. Amara had reluctantly allowed the visit. An hour, no longer. Malik lifted his head suddenly, eyes sharp with thought. "Mama?" "Yes, baby." Amara was folding laundry on the sofa, her eyes never leaving the neat stacks. He pointed at Ethan with the green crayon still in his hand. "Is he my daddy?" The air stilled. Amara's heart slammed. She looked at Ethan, who froze where he sat, his breath caught. She swallowed. "Why do you ask?" "Because the kids at church said every boy has a daddy," Malik replied. His tone wasn't accusing, just curious. "They asked me where mine was. I said I didn't know. But now—" He gestured at Ethan, crayon tapping against the paper. "He looks like me." Ethan's chest ached. He wanted to leap in, to claim Malik right then, to say, "Yes, I'm yours, you're mine." But he also knew this moment was delicate, fragile. Amara set the shirt down slowly. She had rehearsed answers for herself, not for Malik. The truth pressed at her lips, but so did the fear of betrayal, the fear of letting her son love a man who might fail him again. She forced her voice steady. "Malik, that's a question for both of us to answer. Do you want the truth?" He nodded firmly. Amara glanced at Ethan. His eyes begged. She exhaled and said, "Yes, he is your father." Malik blinked. The word seemed foreign on his tongue. "Daddy," Ethan's throat tightened. He whispered, "Yes, son." The boy studied him. "So where were you?" Ethan swallowed hard. "I didn't know about you. If I had, I would have been here from the start." "But you knew, Mama," Malik said simply. Children had a way of slicing through excuses. Ethan's eyes burned. "I did, and I hurt her. That was wrong, but I never wanted to hurt you." Malik tapped the crayon against his paper again. "So, are you staying now, or leaving again?" The bluntness knocked Ethan silent. He looked at Amara, who crossed her arms, waiting for his answer too. He leaned forward, voice low and certain. "I'm staying. No matter how long it takes for you to believe me, I'm staying." Malik's face softened slightly. "Okay, but you got to prove it. Daddies go to soccer games, and they help with homework, and they tuck you in sometimes." Ethan felt tears sting his eyes. "Then that's what I'll do, if you'll let me," Malik considered. Then he handed Ethan the green crayon. "Color with me." Ethan took it with trembling fingers. Together, they filled the castle's towers in green. Later that night, after Malik had gone to bed, Amara confronted Ethan in the kitchen. "You realize what you just promised him?" Her tone was sharp, her arms folded. "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "You looked him in the eye and told him you'd stay. If you walk away now, Ethan—" "I won't," he interrupted. His eyes were steady, burning with conviction. "I don't care what deals I lose or what boardrooms think. That boy called me daddy. I'm not breaking that." Amara searched his face for cracks, for hesitation. For once she found none, but her defenses rose anyway. "He's testing you, Ethan. He doesn't even know the half of what that word means." "Then I'll learn it with him," Ethan said simply. Her breath caught, because his words sounded less like the Ethan she remembered and more like the man she had prayed he could become. The next morning, Malik raced into her room before school. "Mama, Daddy said he'd come to my game Saturday. Can he? Please!" Amara's heart twisted. The hope in her son's eyes was a force she couldn't fight. She nodded. That evening, Ethan showed up at the park in sneakers instead of dress shoes. He sat on the bleachers, clapping wildly when Malik kicked the ball. Other parents stared, some curious, some whispering, but Ethan didn't care. He was learning fatherhood in real time, and every cheer felt like a vow kept. When the game ended, Malik ran into his arms, sweaty and laughing. "You saw me score. I wouldn't have missed it," Ethan said, holding him tight. Amara stood nearby, watching. Her heart warred between relief and fear. She whispered to herself, "Please, God, don't let him disappoint us again." The weeks that followed were not built on grand gestures, but on small, steady acts, the kind that could only be sustained by someone truly committed. Ethan knew words had carried him once before, but this time only action would matter. Ethan began showing up early, waiting outside Amara's building so he could walk Malik to school. At first, Amara resisted. "You don't have to do this," she said the first morning, arms crossed, car keys in hand. "I want to," Ethan replied, "even if it's just to carry his backpack." Malik popped his head out the door, grinning. "Castle man, you ready?" Ethan smiled. "Always." They walked the short distance to school together. Malik chatted about dinosaurs and math problems, his small hands swinging against Ethan's. By the time they reached the gates, other kids were waving at Malik's new buddy. Ethan bent down, whispering, "Proud of you already." Ethan brought dinner. Not expensive takeout, but food he had clumsily learned to cook. Spaghetti with too much garlic. Chicken slightly over-seasoned. Amara arched her brow every time, but Malik devoured it, delighted that Daddy cooks funny. "You run companies," Amara teased once, "but can't manage a frying pan?" Ethan chuckled, wiping sauce off Malik's cheek. "I'm learning. He's worth learning for—" That quiet admission softened her, even if she didn't say so aloud. He came to every soccer game. Rain or shine, suit or sneakers, Ethan was there. When Malik stumbled, Ethan shouted encouragement. When Malik scored, Ethan leapt from the bleachers, cheering loudest of all. Parents noticed. Some whispered, others nodded in approval. Amara kept her distance, but she watched carefully. Ethan wasn't trying to impress anyone else. He was locked on Malik, every ounce of attention devoted to him. After one game, Malik ran into Ethan's arms, breathless with joy. "Did you see that kick?" "I did," Ethan said, lifting him high. "That was all heart." Malik beamed. "Mama, Daddy said I played with heart." Amara's chest tightened. The word Daddy rolled off Malik's tongue now with ease, no hesitation, no testing. Some nights when Malik couldn't sleep, Amara would find Ethan already on the phone with him. "Tell me about your castle design." Ethan's voice would drift from the bedroom speaker. "What's new this time?" "There's a drawbridge," Malik said, yawning. "And dragons can come visit, but only if they're nice." Ethan laughed softly. "I'll bring the drawbridge plans tomorrow. Sleep well, King." Amara leaned against the wall outside the door, listening. It hurt and healed at once, hearing Ethan there, steady, gentle, present. One Friday evening, Ethan arrived drenched in rain. He had flown back from a board meeting in New York, skipped a private jet connection, and rushed straight from the airport to Malik's spelling bee. When Amara saw him dripping in the school auditorium hallway, she shook her head. "You're late." "I know," Ethan panted, "but I'm here." Inside, Malik sat nervously on stage. When he spotted Ethan in the crowd, his face lit up. His nervous bouncing stopped. He spelled each word clearly, confidently, until he won second place. Later, Malik threw himself into Ethan's arms. "You came!" Ethan kissed his son's temple. "Always." Amara stood nearby, silent. Her skepticism cracked a little more. After putting Malik to bed that night, Amara cornered Ethan in the kitchen. "You're proving me wrong." "Good," Ethan said. "I hate that," she admitted. "Because I want to believe you. But part of me is still waiting for the other shoe to drop." He leaned against the counter, soaked in honesty. "Then let me keep showing up until there's no shoe left to drop." Her breath hitched. It wasn't poetry, it was persistence. The turning point came quietly one evening. Malik had drawn another family picture. This time the stick figures stood hand in hand. M for Mama, E for Daddy, M for Malik. Above it, in shaky block letters, he had written, "Us." He held it up proudly. "See, Mama, we're a team now." Amara's throat tightened. She met Ethan's eyes across the room. For once, she didn't look away. Ethan had proven persistence not through grand declarations, but through consistency. Backpacks carried, dinners cooked, games attended, phone calls answered, promises kept. Piece by piece, brick by brick, he was rebuilding trust, and Amara, despite herself, began to believe. For years, Ethan Caldwell's life had been a blur of airports, boardrooms, and late-night calls. His calendar dictated everything. Meals skipped, birthdays missed, relationships broken. But after Malik called him Daddy, something shifted. Suddenly, those meticulously arranged meetings felt hollow compared to a boy's small smile. He realized quickly, to be a father, he would have to become a different man. The first test came on a Monday morning when his assistant, Claire, walked into his glass-walled office with a stack of folders. "Sir, the investors are requesting a dinner this Saturday, 7 o'clock at the downtown Hyatt." "I'll confirm." Ethan leaned back in his chair. Saturday. Malik had a soccer game. Cancel it, Ethan said simply. Claire blinked. Cancel? With global partners? Reschedule, he corrected. Tell them I'm unavailable. She hesitated, then nodded slowly, scribbling notes. For as long as she'd worked with Ethan, he had never turned down a Saturday meeting. Rumors would swirl, but Ethan didn't care. That afternoon, Marcus stormed into his office. What's going on with you? You skipped the Zurich call last week, now you're dodging partners? Ethan's voice was calm but firm. I'm restructuring. My priorities are changing. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Because of her? Because of him, Ethan replied, gesturing to a drawing taped on the edge of his desk, Malik's crayon family portrait. Marcus stared. He had seen Ethan throw millions at mergers without blinking, but never had he seen him cling to a child's sketch like it was treasure. Ethan. Marcus softened. You know this isn't how the business world works. If you start showing weakness— This isn't weakness, Ethan interrupted. It's strength. The kind I should have chosen years ago. At first, the shift was rocky. Ethan's calendar grew strange to his staff. He blocked evenings for personal time. He refused late dinners that clashed with Malik's bedtime. He carved out afternoons for school events, shocking employees used to his relentless pace. Some whispered. Some doubted. But Ethan stayed steady. One Wednesday, he sat in the back row of Malik's classroom for Parents' Day. The boy's face had lit up when Ethan walked in, and that single smile was worth more than any quarterly report. Castleman, Malik whispered loudly, waving. The teacher smiled. Malik, would you like to introduce your guest? Malik grinned, standing proudly. This is my daddy. He builds castles with me. The word landed like a benediction. Ethan's throat burned, but he smiled and waved. He spent the morning helping with papier-mâché projects, careful not to ruin his shirt with glue. When he left, Malik slipped a folded note into his hand. Thanks for coming. You're the best. Evenings were no longer silent dinners at his penthouse. Ethan began driving across town to Amara's neighborhood. Sometimes he stayed for homework, sounding out spelling words with Malik. Other times, he cooked dinner, poorly but with effort, until Amara teased him into watching YouTube recipes. One night, Malik yawned during a math worksheet. Daddy, why are you always here now? Ethan froze. Then he said softly, because I finally learned what matters most. Amara, washing dishes in the kitchen, heard him, her hands stilled in the suds. At Caldwell Enterprises, Ethan's board grumbled. You can't step back now, one investor warned during a quarterly meeting. Ethan leaned forward. I built this company to secure a future. Now that future has a name, Malik. If you can't support me balancing both, you don't understand what legacy means. The room fell silent. For once, he didn't care about their approval. Gradually, his life reshaped itself. Friday nights meant takeout with Amara and Malik, watching old movies under blankets. Saturday mornings meant soccer games, not conference calls. Sunday afternoons meant visiting Amara's mother, where Ethan humbly accepted her sharp questions about his past mistakes. Bit by bit, the empire builder was becoming a family man. One evening, after Malik had gone to bed, Ethan sat on Amara's porch. She joined him with folded arms, skeptical as ever. You're really doing this, she murmured. I told you I would, Ethan said. You've walked away before. He shook his head. Not again. I'm done building a life that doesn't include the two of you. She studied him quietly, the porch light casting soft shadows across his face. She wanted to believe, but belief would take time. For now, she simply said, We'll see. But even we'll see was progress. Ethan smiled into the night, knowing transformation was never about one grand leap, but 1,000 small steps, and he was finally taking them. Amara had spent years perfecting the art of doubt. It was her armor, polished sharp after nights of disappointment, after empty promises she'd once believed. So when Ethan began showing up with regularity, her first instinct was suspicion. Consistency isn't the same as change, she reminded herself as she folded Malik's laundry one Friday night. People play roles when it suits them. But the problem was this: Ethan didn't stop showing up, and the more he came, the harder it was to maintain the armor. It started small. He kept appearing on weeknights, knocking on her door at predictable times. Sometimes he brought dinner, sometimes just himself. Malik squealed every time, "Daddy's here!" Amara waited for the night he wouldn't come, the call that would explain how urgent business stole him away. That night never arrived. One Wednesday, a storm rolled in, thunder cracking the sky. Amara put Malik to bed early, thinking Ethan wouldn't risk the drive. But at 8:10 p.m. there was a knock on the door. Ethan stood there, soaked, holding Malik's favorite bedtime storybook under his jacket. "You're late," she said flatly, though her chest squeezed. Traffic was a mess, Ethan admitted, water dripping from his hair. "But I promised him I'd read." She stared, speechless, as he stepped inside, shaking off the rain. That night, Ethan sat on Malik's bed, reading Goodnight Moon with dramatic voices, making Malik laugh until he drifted into dreams. Amara lingered in the doorway, her arms folded, her doubts quieter than usual. Amara had assumed his business empire would eventually call him back in full. But one afternoon she met an old acquaintance, Denise again, who worked downtown. "You know your man turned down 3 contracts last month?" Denise whispered over coffee. Amara frowned. "What do you mean?" He told his team he won't travel weekends anymore. "Said family comes first." Denise arched her brow. "I thought you should know. It's all people talk about at the Hyatt boardroom." Amara sipped her coffee, hiding her surprise. Ethan had told her he was adjusting his schedule, but to hear it from others, from the business world he once worshipped, hit differently. That night she asked him outright on the porch, "Is it true? You're refusing contracts?" Ethan leaned back, eyes steady. "I've built enough. The company won't fall without me chasing every deal, but Malik will notice if I'm gone." His words were simple. No performance, no plea, just truth, and that truth unsettled her more than lies ever could. Change revealed itself in the details. Ethan cooking pancakes on Saturday mornings, flipping them too high and laughing when one landed on the floor. Ethan at church, sitting quietly beside her and Malik, bowing his head in prayer without needing attention. Ethan fixing Malik's bike tire, fumbling with the wrench until Malik giggled, "Daddy, you don't know what you're doing." And Ethan laughed, "Not yet, but I'll learn." These weren't showpieces for Amara. They were unpolished, humble moments, the kind you couldn't fake for long. One evening, after Malik fell asleep on the couch, Amara found herself whispering aloud, "Maybe he really has changed." Of course, doubt didn't vanish easily. One Sunday night, Amara confronted him after Malik was asleep. "Why now?" she asked, leaning against the counter. "You could have come back a year ago, 5 years ago. Why should I believe this isn't just guilt talking?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "Because guilt fades. This hasn't. Every time I see him, I see what I almost lost forever. That's not guilt. That's love." His words hit her deeper than she wanted to admit. She looked away, blinking hard. "You think words fix things?" she murmured. "No," Ethan said firmly. "That's why I'm not stopping. Words open the door. Actions keep me in the room." Amara swallowed. For the first time, she couldn't find a retort. One night, Amara tucked Malik into bed and lingered in the hallway. She overheard him whispering his prayers. "Thank you for Mama. Thank you for Daddy. Please make them happy." Tears stung her eyes. Malik had slipped Ethan into his nightly talks with God, as though he had always been there. Later, on the porch, Amara sat beside Ethan in silence. The night air was crisp, cicadas buzzing faintly. For once, she didn't question, didn't critique. She just sat with him, letting the quiet feel almost safe. Ethan glanced at her. "What?" "Nothing," she said softly. But in her heart, she knew something was shifting. For the first time in years, Amara caught herself watching Ethan, not with suspicion, but with reluctant admiration, and that scared her most of all. The summer evening glowed golden as families gathered at the community park for Malik's end-of-season soccer barbecue. Tables were covered in aluminum trays of hot dogs and baked beans. Children darted between picnic benches with sticky popsicles, and parents clustered in folding chairs, swapping stories. Ethan stood a little apart, manning the grill. His white button-up sleeves were rolled up, his tie absent, a streak of ketchup on his cheek courtesy of Malik's earlier sneak-attack hug. He looked nothing like the cold, untouchable CEO the city knew. Tonight, he was just another dad flipping burgers, laughing when smoke curled too thick, letting kids help by holding spatulas twice their size. Amara watched from a distance, arms folded, eyes wary but softening. She couldn't deny it anymore. Ethan had been steady for months. Still, she reminded herself, Malik's heart was not a toy. Malik came tearing across the grass, his cleats kicking up dust. "Castle man!" he shouted, the name still lingering on his tongue, though lately used less often. Ethan turned, smiling wide. "What's up, champ? Coach said I was fastest today," Malik announced proudly, clutching a small participation medal. Ethan crouched to eye level, his face glowing with pride. "Fastest and bravest. That's my boy." Malik hesitated. He chewed his lip, medal clutched in his fist. Then, almost too quietly to hear, he whispered, "Thanks, Dad." The word hung in the air, small, fragile, tremendous. Ethan froze, every muscle tight, as though the earth itself had stopped spinning, his throat closed, eyes stinging hot. Slowly, carefully, he said, "Say that again?" Malik's voice grew bolder this time. "Dad." The world blurred. Ethan pulled his son into his arms, holding him close, fighting to breathe through the tidal wave of emotion. "You don't know," Ethan choked, "what that means to me." Malik shrugged, as though it were obvious. "You've been here. Dad, stay. So, you're mine." Ethan buried his face in Malik's hair, letting the tears fall freely. Amara had witnessed many moments, Ethan's wealth on display, his charm in rooms full of people, his arrogance on their wedding day years ago. But she had never seen him undone like this, kneeling in the dirt of a public park, clutching his son as though the medal was gold and the word Dad was the crown on his head. Her eyes burned, but she blinked the tears away. She would not let herself crumble so easily, yet the sight carved something deep inside her, undeniable proof that Ethan wasn't here for show. Later, as the sun dipped low and families packed up, Ethan walked Malik to the car. "You really meant that?" he asked, voice thick. Malik looked at him like the answer was simple. "Yeah, you're Dad now." Ethan knelt again, meeting his eyes. "That's the greatest honor of my life." Malik grinned. "Cool. But next time, bring more chips." Ethan laughed through tears. "Deal." That night, after Malik was asleep, Amara joined Ethan on the porch. The air smelled faintly of charcoal and summer grass. "He called you Dad," she said softly, almost in disbelief. Ethan nodded, his voice trembling. "I've signed contracts worth billions, Amara. None of them meant anything compared to that one word." She looked at him closely. The pride, the humility, the love shining through his eyes. This wasn't the man she had once left. This was someone else entirely. Her heart fluttered, but her defenses rose. "Don't make him regret it." "Never," Ethan said firmly. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of it." Amara turned away, gripping the porch railing. The ache in her chest was dangerous, hope pressing against the cracks in her walls. Inside, Malik stirred in his sleep, a small smile on his lips. For the first time, his prayers had shifted. Thank you, God, for Mama. Thank you for Dad. It started with small glances, the kind Amara tried to ignore but couldn't. The way Ethan bent to tie Malik's shoes without complaint. The way he laughed freely now, lighter than she remembered. The way he looked at Malik, and then, when he thought no one noticed, at her. Amara told herself it was nothing, just co-parenting, just relief that Malik had a father. But one evening changed everything. Ethan had insisted on cooking again. This time, he'd practiced. The scent of rosemary chicken filled Amara's kitchen, mingling with garlic bread that hadn't burned. Malik set the table with unmatched enthusiasm, declaring himself head waiter. When they sat down, Malik bowed his head quickly. Thank you for the food, God, and for Mama, and for Dad. Amen. Amara's breath caught. Ethan's eyes glistened. The prayer was brief, but it wrapped the room in warmth. They ate, laughed, teased Ethan when he spilled water. After Malik was tucked into bed, Amara returned to the kitchen to find Ethan quietly washing dishes. You don't have to do that, she said softly. I want to, he replied without turning. Besides, I made the mess. She leaned against the counter, watching him. His sleeves were rolled up, his hands steady in the soapy water. It struck her suddenly how ordinary, how intimate the moment felt. Not grand, not flashy, just simple togetherness. Ethan, she said, her voice lower than intended. He turned, drying his hands, their eyes locked. Something unspoken hung in the air. Later they stepped onto the porch. The night air was cool, the stars faint above city lights. Ethan's voice was quiet. He makes me whole in ways I didn't think possible. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the ruthless CEO she had walked away from, but a man stripped bare, humbled by love. You've changed, she admitted reluctantly. His lips curved faintly. I had to. Losing you, losing him. It woke me up. Silence lingered, their shoulders brushed lightly as they leaned against the railing. It was a small touch, but it sent warmth coursing through Amara's chest. A week later, Malik begged to stay up for movie night. He dozed halfway through, curled in a blanket between them. Amara carried him to bed, and when she returned, Ethan was scrolling through music on his phone. You remember this? He asked, playing a soft jazz track that had once been their song. Amara froze. The melody tugged at buried memories, stolen dances in tiny kitchens, laughter spilling between kisses. I can't believe you kept that, she whispered. Ethan stood, offering his hand. Dance with me. She hesitated. Ethan, just one song. Her fingers slipped into his before she could stop herself. He pulled her close, one hand resting respectfully at her waist. They swayed slowly, the music weaving around them. It wasn't passion, not yet. It was tension, unspoken words, restrained desire, old love flickering back to life. Amara rested her head lightly against his chest, only for a moment. His heartbeat thudded steady, real, grounding. When the song ended, she stepped back quickly, breath uneven. This doesn't mean anything. Ethan's eyes softened. It means everything. 2 nights later, Ethan stayed late helping Malik with a school project. After Malik went to bed, Ethan lingered by the door, keys in hand. Good night, Amara said, her voice softer than usual. Good night, he echoed. But neither moved. Silence pressed between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Ethan took a slow step closer, his hand brushing hers at the doorframe. Electricity sparked, quiet but undeniable. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to just them, the porch light, the hum of summer night, the pull of gravity drawing them together. Then Amara pulled back, swallowing hard. Not yet. Ethan nodded, respect shining in his eyes. I'll wait, for as long as it takes. That night, lying awake, Amara touched her lips with trembling fingers. She hated how much she wanted the kiss and how much she feared it. But in the quiet of her heart, she admitted the truth. The fire between them had never gone out. The morning after their almost kiss, Amara found herself moving slower in the kitchen. The scent of brewing coffee filled the small space, sunlight pooling across the counters. She kept glancing at the porch where Ethan had stood the night before, his words still echoing, "I'll wait, for as long as it takes." She wanted to scoff, to remind herself that waiting wasn't his strong suit. But the truth lingered. He had waited. Weeks of consistency, months of patience, each step a quiet knock at the locked door of her heart. That Saturday, Malik begged for a trip to Lincoln Park Zoo. Ethan offered to drive. Amara agreed, nerves twisting as they piled into his sleek black SUV. The day unfolded in small, startling joys. Malik perched on Ethan's shoulders to see the giraffes. They shared ice cream, Malik smearing chocolate on both their noses, until Amara laughed harder than she had in years. Ethan snapped photos, not of lions or zebras, but of Malik holding both their hands at once. Amara caught him watching her once, his eyes warm. She looked away quickly, but not before the flutter in her chest betrayed her. That evening, they returned exhausted but content. Malik fell asleep in the back seat, his head lolling. Amara turned to Ethan. "You've done well," she admitted softly. Ethan glanced at her, surprised. "Coming from you, that means everything." "I'm not promising anything," she warned. "I'm not asking you to," he said. "I just want the chance to keep showing up." Her lips curved slightly despite herself. "You already are." It wasn't surrender, but it was the closest she had come. Later, after tucking Malik into bed, Amara stepped onto the porch. Ethan was already there, leaning against the railing like he belonged. "I don't know if I can ever forget the past," she admitted quietly. "I don't want you to," he replied. "It shaped us. But I want to build something new on top of it." Her eyes glistened. "You make it sound easy." "It won't be easy," Ethan said firmly, "but it will be worth it." She studied him, silence stretching. Finally, she let out a breath. "Maybe. I can try." Ethan's chest tightened. "That's all I ask." Their hands brushed on the railing. This time, she didn't pull away. The next week, Malik presented them both with a drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a roof labeled home. "Look," he said proudly. "It's us." Amara's throat ached. Ethan's hand found hers instinctively. She didn't move it. For the first time in years, Amara let hope in, cautiously, quietly, but real. As Ethan and Amara stood side by side, watching their son beam, the story of second chances was no longer theory. It was alive, unfolding in front of them. If you believe in second chances, drop a heart in the comments. Your support helps this channel share more stories that remind us all. Love can heal, families can rebuild, and hope is never wasted. The morning sun streamed through the curtains of Amara's apartment, spilling warmth onto the balloons scattered across the living room floor. Malik's 7th birthday had arrived, and the house buzzed with anticipation. Streamers in blue and gold crisscrossed the ceiling, the scent of chocolate cake filled the air, and Malik's laughter rang out as he dashed from room to room in his new sneakers. "Slow down, birthday boy," Amara called, pinning another banner to the wall. "But Mama, everyone's coming," Malik said, his grin wide. "And Daddy too." Amara froze for a moment at the ease with which Malik used the word now. It still startled her, how quickly the title had cemented itself. She turned, her gaze softening at the sight of her son's joy. "Yes, he'll be here." By late afternoon, the community center was alive with music and chatter. Families carried gifts, children ran around clutching party hats, and neighbors filled the hall with warmth. Ethan stood outside for a moment, straightening his tie, inhaling deeply. He wasn't nervous about boardrooms anymore, but this was different. Today there would be no shadows, no hesitation. Today he was not Ethan Caldwell, the CEO. He was Ethan Caldwell, Malik's father. When he walked in, Malik spotted him immediately. "Daddy!" The boy launched himself across the room. Ethan scooped him up, lifting him high, laughter breaking free from his chest. For a moment, the noise of the crowd melted away. "You ready for your big day, champ?" Ethan asked. Malik nodded eagerly. "Come see my cake." Amara approached, dressed in a soft cream dress that shimmered under the lights. She looked poised but tense, as though still bracing for something to go wrong. "You came," she said quietly. "I told you I wouldn't miss it," Ethan replied, his voice firm. As the party unfolded, eyes followed Ethan. Some recognized him instantly. The business magazines had printed his face often enough. Whispers floated through the air. "That's Ethan Caldwell, right? What's he doing here? Isn't that Amara's boy? He looks just like him." Amara noticed the murmurs. Her spine stiffened, ready to shield Malik from gossip. But then she saw Ethan kneeling to tie Malik's balloon string, laughing when the boy insisted it had to be double-knotted. He didn't seem to notice the stares. Or maybe he didn't care. For the first time she wondered if Ethan had finally learned how to put love above appearances. When it was time for cake, everyone gathered around the long table. The chocolate frosting glistened under the candles as children chanted, "Light them! Light them!" Malik clapped his hands, bouncing with excitement. Ethan stood behind him, one steady hand on his shoulder. "Make a wish, champ," he said softly. Malik squeezed his eyes shut, whispered something only he and God would ever know, then blew out the candles. The room erupted in cheers. Before the cake was cut, Ethan cleared his throat. The crowd hushed, surprised. He wasn't on the program, but he stepped forward anyway. "I know many of you know me as Ethan Caldwell," he began, his voice carrying across the hall. "But today, I want you to know me as something far more important. Malik's father." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Amara's heart pounded. Ethan continued, steady. "For too long I was absent from his life. That's a mistake I can never undo. But I stand here today to tell you, and more importantly, to tell him, that I am here now, and I will never leave again." He turned to Malik, eyes shining. "Son, you are the greatest gift I've ever received. I'm proud to be your dad." The room went silent for a beat, then broke into applause. Some clapped politely, others with genuine warmth. Amara stood frozen, her throat tight, tears threatening. Malik, beaming, shouted, "Best daddy ever!" Ethan swept him into a hug, the moment sealed forever in memory. Later, when the guests trickled out and the hall quieted, Amara found Ethan stacking chairs with the volunteers. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Yes, I did," he replied, glancing at her. "It was time to stop hiding. He deserves a father who isn't afraid to be known." Her lips parted, but no words came. She had braced herself for showmanship, for ego, but what she saw was humility. "Ethan," she whispered finally, "thank you." For the first time in years, she meant it. That night, Malik clutched his new toys and whispered before bed, "Today was the best day ever. Daddy made it the best." Amara sat beside him, smoothing his curls, her chest aching with the strange new blend of fear and hope. Fear of falling again. Hope that this time, maybe, it would last. The Monday morning after Malik's birthday party, Ethan strode into Caldwell Enterprises' glass headquarters with the same confidence he'd carried for years. But inside, the energy was different. Whispers trailed him from the lobby to the executive floor. "Did you see the article? Photos from that birthday party. Caldwell, a family man. Since when?" Someone had leaked pictures from the celebration. Ethan on stage, hand on Malik's shoulder, declaring himself a father. What should have been a private milestone had become public news. By noon, the board had called an emergency meeting. Ethan entered to find grim faces lining the long mahogany table. Marcus sat near the head, tapping his pen nervously. Claire, his assistant, clutched her tablet with white knuckles. Richard Lowe, an older investor with a hawk-like stare, leaned forward. "Ethan, we've tolerated your unusual schedule these past months, but public speeches at children's birthday parties, declaring fatherhood like it's a press release. Do you understand what this looks like?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "It looks like truth. Truth doesn't drive stock value," another investor snapped. "Stability does. And the market hates uncertainty. You've been skipping trips, refusing dinners, and now parading your personal life. The press is circling like vultures." Marcus cleared his throat carefully. "They're not entirely wrong. The shareholders want reassurance. They're nervous you've softened." Ethan met Marcus's eyes, steady but calm. "If redefining my priorities is softening, then so be it. I built this company on discipline and sacrifice. Now I'm choosing to discipline myself in a different way, by showing up for my son." A murmur rippled through the room. Some scoffed, others shifted uneasily. Richard leaned back, his voice sharp. "The world doesn't care about your child, Caldwell. It cares about quarterly returns. If you can't keep this company first, then perhaps it's time we consider new leadership." The words struck the table like a gavel. Ethan inhaled slowly, holding back the instinct to lash out. Once he would have fought tooth and nail to prove his dominance. But now, his strength lay in composure. "You can vote however you want," he said evenly. "But remember, I am still the man who built this empire, and I will not apologize for also being a father. If you can't stomach that balance, maybe it's you who don't belong here." The room fell silent. Richard's glare burned, but Ethan didn't flinch. After the meeting, Marcus caught Ethan in the hallway. "You're playing with fire. Richard's been circling the CEO seat for years. You've just handed him ammunition." Ethan sighed, loosening his tie. "If being a father is ammunition, then maybe I've been in the wrong war." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Ethan, I've known you for decades. You've never spoken like this. What's really going on?" Ethan's eyes softened. "What's going on is that I finally see what matters. Malik called me Dad. That word means more than every contract in this building." Marcus studied him, torn between frustration and admiration. "I hope you're right, old friend, because if this board decides you're unfit, they won't hesitate to replace you." By midweek, headlines splashed across business journals. "Caldwell, the family man. CEO shows softer side at son's birthday. Investors question Ethan Caldwell's focus. Fatherhood or fortune?" Reporters camped outside the building, shouting questions whenever Ethan appeared. "Mr. Caldwell, is it true you've reprioritized your empire for family? Will Caldwell Enterprises suffer from your divided attention? Who is the boy in the photos? Is he your heir?" Ethan ignored most of them, but one question stung. "Are you strong enough to lead, or have you gone weak?" He wanted to snap back. Instead, he thought of Malik's small voice calling him Dad. That single word anchored him against the storm. That Friday night, Amara found Ethan on her porch again, his tie undone, exhaustion lining his face. "You look like you fought a war," she said softly. "I did," he murmured. "The board is circling, the press is circling, all because I chose to be a father." Amara folded her arms. "This is what I feared. Your world doesn't allow balance. It demands all or nothing." Ethan met her eyes, raw honesty shining. "Then they'll learn I choose my son. Every time." Her heart twisted. She wanted to believe him, but the stakes were higher than ever now. 2 days later, Marcus called Ethan. "The investors aren't all against you. Some actually admire the shift, say it makes you human. But Richard is louder, and he's pushing for a vote. Ethan sat in silence, gazing at Malik's drawing still taped to his office wall. For the first time, he realized his empire might truly be at risk. But as fear pressed in, Malik's words echoed in his mind, "Dad, stay." And Ethan knew, whatever happened next, he wasn't walking away again. Amara had learned to stop trusting surface promises long ago. People could play roles for months, even years, before showing their true selves. If Ethan wanted her trust, really wanted it, she needed to see more than consistent visits and birthday speeches. She needed to know what came next. One Tuesday evening, Ethan showed up with groceries instead of takeout. He cooked stir-fry in her small kitchen, while Malik sprawled on the floor drawing knights and dragons. When the meal was over and Malik had gone to bed, Amara poured herself tea and sat across from Ethan at the table. "You've been steady," she admitted, her voice measured. "I see the effort. I see Malik happy. But I need to know what this looks like long-term." Ethan leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "I mean school decisions, doctor's visits, vacations, college savings, Malik's future. You don't just step into his life for the fun parts, Ethan. This is about the whole road ahead." Her tone was sharp but not cruel. It was the voice of a mother guarding her child's heart. Ethan didn't flinch. "Then let's talk specifics." Amara arched a brow, surprised at his readiness. "All right. His school, it's a good program, but the classrooms are crowded. There's a private academy across town, expensive, but better resources. Would you invest in that?" "Yes," Ethan answered without hesitation. "If that's what Malik needs." Amara studied him. "And doctor's visits? Malik's asthma flares sometimes. Are you going to cancel meetings if it's your turn to sit in the waiting room?" "I've already cleared my calendar for emergencies," Ethan replied. "Marcus can run a meeting. Malik only has one father." Her heart stumbled, but she pressed on. "Vacations, birthdays, holidays? You've spent years abroad chasing contracts. Will you stay when the world calls?" Ethan's voice was firm. "I'll stay, or if I must travel, I'll bring both of you with me. No more empty chairs at the table." Amara folded her arms, skeptical. "And what about us? If we ever stood in the same house again, under the same roof? Would you still prioritize us when business gets messy, or would we become second place again?" Ethan leaned across the table, his eyes steady. "Amara, the empire I built means nothing if it costs me my family. I lost you once. I will not lose you and Malik again. Not for anything." She searched his face, looking for cracks, for ego, for performance. Instead, she saw raw conviction. It unnerved her more than arrogance ever had. 2 weeks later, Malik had a school presentation about my family. He was supposed to bring photos and speak about the people who mattered most. Amara intentionally gave Ethan the responsibility of helping Malik prepare. It was a test. Would he remember? Would he prioritize it? On presentation day, Ethan not only showed up early, but he carried a poster board with Malik's pictures printed, neatly arranged, with captions written in block letters. Malik stood proudly at the front of the classroom. "This is my mama. This is my dad. They both love me a lot." Ethan sat in the back, his eyes misty, while Amara silently admitted, "He passed this one." One evening, Ethan handed Amara a folder. "This is for Malik." Inside were documents establishing a trust fund in Malik's name, earmarked for education and future security. Amara's breath caught. "You didn't need to do this." "Yes, I did," Ethan said softly. "Because fatherhood isn't just presence, it's preparation. I want him to have choices I never imagined as a kid." Amara closed the folder slowly, her chest heavy. Every wall she had raised was meeting new pressure. One night, while Malik slept, Amara stood by the porch railing. Ethan joined her silently, the city lights twinkling in the distance. "You're passing my tests," she admitted quietly. He smiled faintly. "I didn't know we were keeping score." "We are," she said firmly, because this is Malik's life. I can't afford to gamble on words again. Ethan's gaze softened. Then keep testing me. I'll keep showing up until every wall comes down. For the first time, Amara allowed herself a small smile. Careful. You might succeed, Ethan chuckled. That's the plan. And in the hush of that night, Amara felt something shift again. Not full surrender, not yet, but a step closer to believing that maybe, just maybe, redemption could be real. For weeks, Ethan had balanced boardrooms and bedtime stories with surprising grace. Amara watched with wary admiration as he juggled investor calls on one hand and Malik's science projects on the other. But in early spring, the storm finally broke. One Monday morning, Ethan's office buzzed with tension. Claire, his assistant, burst into his office, tablet in hand. "Sir, we've got a problem. A serious one." She laid the report on his desk. Ethan scanned it quickly, his chest tightening. A rival firm had launched a hostile campaign, undercutting Caldwell Enterprises in multiple markets. Stock prices were plunging. Contracts were in jeopardy. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face grave. "Richard's already calling for an emergency board vote. He'll use this crisis to argue you're distracted, unfit." Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. For the first time in months, the walls of his empire felt shaky beneath him. That afternoon, the boardroom was electric with accusations. Richard stood at the head, waving reports like weapons. "Gentlemen and ladies, here's the reality. Caldwell's negligence has put this company at risk. While he's been parading at school plays and birthday parties, competitors have been eating our market share alive. Do we want a father, or do we want a CEO?" Gasps and murmurs erupted. Ethan remained seated, calm but coiled. When Richard finally paused, Ethan rose. "I've heard enough. Yes, I've made changes. I've chosen not to sacrifice my son for the sake of another contract. But don't mistake that for weakness. The numbers in that report are real, but they're also temporary. I can fix this. The question is whether you'll let me lead or watch Richard tear apart what I built." The board split down the middle. A vote was scheduled in 1 week. That night, Ethan sat on Amara's couch, shoulders heavy. Malik played with action figures at his feet, oblivious to the storm. Amara studied Ethan quietly. "You look like the world's sitting on your chest." "It is," Ethan admitted. "If I don't fix this crisis, they'll strip me of the company. Everything I've worked for, gone. And if you chase it like before," Amara pressed. His eyes flicked to Malik, who was making rocket noises. "Then I risk losing this," he whispered. The silence hung thick. 2 days later, Ethan's calendar filled with emergency flights and strategy sessions. Marcus urged him to take the lead personally. "If you're not on that plane to Tokyo to save the contract, Richard will call it proof you've abandoned your duty," Marcus warned. Ethan stared at his packed bag by the door, but just as he reached for it, his phone buzzed. It was Amara. Her voice trembled. "Ethan, it's Malik. He's at the ER. Asthma attack." The world froze. In that moment, Ethan's entire empire was measured against a single hospital room. Tokyo or Malik, investors or son. He dropped the bag instantly. "I'm coming." Ethan raced through the ER doors to find Amara pacing, her hands pressed together in prayer. When she saw him, tears broke free. "He's stable," she whispered, "but it was bad. He asked for you." Ethan stepped into the room. Malik lay small against the white sheets, a nebulizer mask over his face. His eyes lit up weakly. "Daddy," he croaked. Ethan gripped his son's hand, his own eyes burning. "I'm here, champ. I'll always be here." The beeping machines, the sterile walls, the fragility of that moment. It all slammed into Ethan with brutal clarity. Empires could crumble. Money could vanish. But this child's trust, this child's love, was irreplaceable. The next day, headlines blared. Caldwell skips emergency contract flight, company future in doubt. Richard seized the narrative, rallying investors. He abandoned us at the hour of crisis. He chose his personal life over the company. But Ethan didn't waver. At Malik's bedside, watching his son breathe steadily again, he whispered to himself, "If this costs me the company, so be it." Amara, sitting nearby, studied him through tired eyes. For the first time, she believed him without reservation. "You really did choose him," she murmured. Ethan looked at her. "I always should have. I just needed to lose everything else to finally see it." 1 week later, the board gathered for the vote. The atmosphere in the Caldwell Enterprises boardroom felt like a courtroom on Judgment Day. Suits rustled, whispers darted from corner to corner, and Richard sat poised like a predator, ready to seize his prize. Marcus leaned toward Ethan before the session began. "You still have a chance to sway them. One speech. But you need to decide right now, empire or family. You can't hold both in your hands anymore." Ethan exhaled slowly, the weight of decades pressing on him. He rose, buttoning his jacket, and stepped to the head of the table. He began quietly, forcing everyone to lean in. "For years, I lived as though this company was my heartbeat. I sacrificed birthdays, anniversaries, and love itself to keep it alive. And I succeeded. But in doing so, I lost something far greater." He paused, eyes scanning the room. "Last week, my son lay in a hospital bed struggling to breathe. The board expected me on a plane to Tokyo. I chose him, and I'll make that choice again, every time. If that disqualifies me in your eyes, then perhaps I was never the man you needed leading this empire." Gasps stirred, but Ethan pressed on. "You can replace me as CEO, but know this, leadership isn't measured by contracts signed. It's measured by what a man refuses to abandon, and I will not abandon my son." For a moment, silence blanketed the room. Some investors shifted uncomfortably. Others looked down, guilty. Richard's face twisted in triumph. The vote was called. Richard pushed his papers forward. "I nominate Ethan Caldwell be removed as CEO," hands lifted. 1, 2, 3. The tally climbed. But then, unexpectedly, a woman at the far end of the table, an investor known for her sharp pragmatism, raised her hand against Richard. "No," she said firmly. "The world has enough cold empires. A company that backs a man who chooses family will inspire loyalty money can't buy." Another hand joined hers. Then another. The final tally split down the middle. By company bylaws, Ethan's vote would break the tie. He looked at Marcus, then at the papers before him. His hand trembled for only a moment. Then he lowered his ballot. "I vote to step down." A ripple of shock tore through the room. Richard smirked, already savoring his victory. But Ethan felt only freedom. That evening, Ethan walked into Amara's living room without a tie, without the weight of his empire on his shoulders. Malik ran into his arms, laughing, unaware of the empire that had just shifted hands. "You're home early, Daddy." Ethan hugged him tightly. "Home is where I belong." Amara studied him carefully. "You really did it, didn't you?" He nodded. "The company is theirs now. Let Richard play king. I'm done sacrificing life for walls of glass and steel." For the first time in years, Amara let tears fall freely. "I never thought I'd see the day." Ethan stepped closer, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Neither did I. But losing that title feels like gaining the world." As they stood together in that quiet moment, Ethan spoke softly to Amara, but also, in spirit, to every heart listening. "When life forces you to choose, don't let fear trick you into valuing empires over love. Family is the empire worth building. If you believe that, drop a heart in the comments. Let the world know love comes first." Weeks passed. Without Ethan's constant chase, dinners became routine. Malik's laughter filled rooms Ethan once drowned in silence. Amara's smile, cautious but growing, lit corners no stock report ever could. One evening on the porch, Malik wedged himself between them, clutching their hands. "This is my favorite family," he declared. Ethan kissed the boy's head, then glanced at Amara. "Ours too, champ, ours too." The empire he once worshipped was gone, but the life he gained, laughter at dinner, bedtime prayers, Amara's eyes softening toward him, was more than redemption. It was victory. The days that followed Ethan's resignation were strange at first, almost too quiet. He was so used to waking before dawn, racing to back-to-back meetings, and surviving on adrenaline that the absence of chaos felt foreign. But slowly, that quiet transformed into something steadier, something alive. Instead of stock tickers, he now woke to Malik bounding into his bedroom, holding up messy drawings and demanding breakfast together. Instead of investor calls, his mornings were filled with pancakes, syrup-sticky fingers, and Malik's never-ending curiosity about dinosaurs and space rockets. At first, Ethan's hands fumbled with the small rituals of family life, packing lunches, folding laundry, waiting in school pickup lines. But every imperfection became a badge of progress. When Amara teased him for putting Malik's shoes on the wrong feet, he only laughed and started again. This was rebuilding, not grand gestures but brick by brick, morning by morning. Amara didn't immediately melt into the new rhythm. She had lived through Ethan's absence once, and the scars of disappointment ran deep. At first, she watched closely, waiting for cracks in his resolve. But what she saw instead disarmed her. Ethan never flinched at the ordinary. He joined Malik at PTA meetings without complaint. He stood patiently in line at the pharmacy when Malik's inhaler needed a refill. He even learned to braid simple styles into Malik's hair on rushed school mornings. The Ethan she remembered once measured worth in contracts and headlines. The Ethan she saw now measured worth in Malik's laughter and quiet evenings on the porch. Every day, her suspicion loosened one thread at a time. One afternoon, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. Amara raised a brow, suspicion flashing. "Back to business already?" she asked. He shook his head, smiling. "Not like before. I'm drafting a mentorship program, helping young entrepreneurs in Atlanta get started. No board meetings, no empire, just guidance. I want Malik to see that success isn't about climbing to the tallest tower. It's about building something that helps others." Amara's chest warmed. It wasn't empty talk, it was evidence of change. By spring, their evenings fell into a natural cadence. Malik would sprawl on the rug with Legos. Ethan sprawled beside him, building crooked towers and pretending to lose every battle Malik invented. Amara would watch from the couch, her laughter soft but genuine, sometimes joining in, sometimes just letting the scene wash over her. Once, Ethan caught her watching and whispered, "I forgot how much I love hearing you laugh." Amara blinked, a quiet ache rising in her chest. "I forgot how much I missed it." They didn't rush back into romance, but something tender glowed between them, trust being rebuilt not in declarations, but in quiet presence. Children notice more than adults admit. One night, after Ethan tucked him in, Malik asked with sleepy curiosity, "Daddy, are you going to stay forever this time?" Malik smiled drowsily. "Good, 'cause Mama smiles more when you're here." When Ethan shared that with Amara later, she looked down at her tea, cheeks flushed. She didn't deny it. Weeks turned into months, and the routines deepened. Ethan and Amara alternated cooking dinners, often laughing when one burned something. Malik loved dragging them both outside to play catch in the yard, his shrieks echoing down the block. Ethan even joined Amara on her community clinic rounds sometimes, humbled by the patients she counseled. Seeing her in her element, compassionate and unshakable, made him admire her even more. He confessed one evening, "I used to think building skyscrapers made me powerful, but watching you heal people, that's real strength." Amara's eyes softened, her heart bending toward him a little more. It wasn't perfect. There were days Ethan's old instincts reared up, the urge to check emails during dinner, the frustration at small inconveniences. Once, Malik spilled juice all over his laptop and Ethan's voice snapped too sharply. Amara stood firm. "If you want this life, Ethan, patience comes with it. Malik doesn't need a CEO at home. He needs a father who can breathe through messes." Ethan exhaled, crouching to Malik's level. "I'm sorry, champ. It's just a computer. You're worth more than anything on it." Amara watched closely. Years ago he might have defended his pride. Now he humbled himself to grow. That difference spoke louder than any apology. By summer, what began as tentative rebuilding had become something stronger. The house no longer felt divided between past and present. Instead, it carried the rhythm of a family rediscovering itself. Malik's laughter filled the mornings. Amara's voice, humming softly as she cooked, anchored the evenings. Ethan's steady presence wrapped around them like a promise fulfilled. The empire was gone, but a new kingdom had risen, one of trust, forgiveness, and presence. And though scars remained, they were no longer barriers. They were reminders of battles fought and lessons learned. Months after stepping down as CEO, Ethan announced something that caught Atlanta's attention. He was hosting a gala. The same circles who once watched him fall from corporate power now buzzed with curiosity. But this wasn't the Ethan Caldwell they remembered. This event wasn't about showcasing his empire. It was about raising funds for community programs, youth mentorship, scholarships, and health clinics. When reporters asked why, Ethan answered simply, "Because power is wasted if it doesn't lift others." The evening of the gala, Amara helped Malik into a tiny suit. He fidgeted with the tie until she adjusted it with a laugh. "You look just like Daddy," she teased. Malik grinned. "Good. Then people will know I'm his son." Across the room, Ethan straightened his jacket, watching them with quiet pride. This time, there was no vanity in his reflection, only gratitude. The ballroom glittered as guests poured in, business leaders, civic officials, community workers. But instead of the stiff, cold atmosphere of past galas, warmth filled the air. Children from local schools handed out programs. A gospel choir greeted guests with harmonies that stirred the soul. When Ethan walked in with Amara on his arm and Malik trotting proudly beside them, cameras flashed. But Ethan didn't flinch under the attention. He wasn't hiding anymore. Later, the lights dimmed and Ethan took the stage. The crowd hushed, expecting the polished arrogance of the man they once knew. Instead, his voice carried humility. "Not long ago, I thought success meant standing above everyone else. But the higher I climbed, the lonelier it became. I lost the people who mattered most." He paused, eyes flicking to Amara and Malik. "Tonight isn't about rebuilding my name. It's about rebuilding lives. The funds we raise will support clinics, schools, and families who need what I once ignored: presence, hope, and opportunity. If you want to know what legacy looks like, look not at towers of glass, but at the children who will rise because we chose to lift them." The room erupted in applause, some guests even on their feet. From her table, Amara felt tears sting her eyes. This was the Ethan she once believed in, the man she thought had been swallowed by greed. But here he was, not only restored, but transformed. Malik leaned over, whispering proudly, "Mama, that's my dad." Her heart swelled. By the end of the night, pledges exceeded every expectation. Millions were raised, not for Ethan's pockets, but for scholarships and clinics. Local leaders shook his hand with genuine gratitude, not political calculation. For the first time, Ethan left a gala not feeling empty but fulfilled. Later that night, after the hall had emptied, Ethan stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights. Amara joined him, her shawl wrapped tightly. "You know," she said softly, You mirrored the night everything fell apart, except this time you chose differently. Ethan turned to her, sincerity etched in his face. Because this time, I know what matters. The Gala doesn't matter. You and Malik do. This city does. Amara studied him, the corners of her mouth tugging upward. Maybe redemption isn't about undoing the past. Maybe it's about rewriting the present. Ethan reached for her hand. With you by my side, I'll keep rewriting until every page holds meaning. The morning after the fundraiser, Atlanta's social pages were ablaze with photographs. Ethan on stage, his hand on Malik's shoulder. Amara in the audience smiling with pride. Headlines read, Ethan Caldwell returns, not as CEO but as father and partner. From power to presence, Caldwell family's new chapter. For years, Ethan and Amara's relationship had lived in half shadows, broken by mistrust, buried beneath ambition, stitched together quietly in Malik's bedroom at night. But now, their story had spilled into the open. Amara sat at her clinic desk that afternoon, scrolling through articles. Her chest tightened. The past whispered warnings, gossip, pity, judgment. She had lived through public scrutiny once, when Ethan's neglect turned into headlines. Did she want to face that spotlight again? When Ethan came by to pick her up, she voiced it. I don't want to be a prop in your redemption arc. I don't want people to look at me and think, there's the woman who finally fixed him. Ethan took her hand gently. You're not my prop, you're my partner. And if people see us together, they'll see strength, yours as much as mine. But if you'd rather stay private, I'll respect that. Amara studied him, eyes narrowing, searching for ego. She found none. Only a man who finally meant every word. A week later, they attended a community fair together, Malik tugging them both toward the carousel, his laughter echoing above the music. Photographers spotted them almost instantly. Cameras clicked furiously, but instead of pulling away, Ethan laced his fingers through Amara's in full view of everyone. He leaned toward her and whispered, "No more hiding." Amara hesitated for only a heartbeat before squeezing back. She smiled, not a forced, polite smile, but one that came from deep within. The next day, photos of them, hand in hand with Malik, hit every local outlet. And this time, Amara didn't flinch. She stood tall, proud. Not everyone took it easily. At Amara's church the following Sunday, whispers rose among the pews. Some smiled knowingly, others frowned, skeptical. During fellowship hour, an older woman approached Amara, her expression stern. "Child, after everything that man put you through, you're taking him back?" Amara inhaled deeply, then answered with quiet strength. "Yes, because he's not the same man anymore. And forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it builds a new future." The woman's lips pressed together, but she nodded slowly. Across the room, Ethan stood with Malik, laughing with children. His eyes met Amara's, and for the first time, she didn't care who was watching. A few nights later, Marcus hosted a small dinner to celebrate Ethan's new community work. As glasses clinked, Marcus stood and raised his voice. "I've known Ethan Caldwell for decades. I've seen him climb, fall, and rise again. But tonight, I don't see the CEO I once followed. I see a man who finally found what matters, and I see the woman who had the courage to believe in him again." All eyes turned toward Amara. She flushed, but Ethan placed a hand over hers. She lifted her glass, her voice steady. "To second chances," she said, "and to choosing love when fear tells you not to." The table erupted in cheers. As they walked home that evening, Malik skipped between them, holding both their hands. Suddenly, he shouted, loud enough for the whole block, "Mama and Daddy are back together!" Amara froze, startled, but Ethan only chuckled. "Well, looks like the announcement's official." Amara looked at her son's glowing face, then at Ethan's steady eyes. Slowly, her lips curved upward. "I guess it is." And just like that, the reunion was no longer whispered. It was lived boldly and without shame. After months of storms and reckonings, their home life began to glow with ordinary beauty. Malik's laughter filled every corner, Ethan's presence steadied every routine, and Amara's warmth stitched it all together. No boardrooms, no public speeches, just Saturday mornings with pancakes sizzling on the stove, while Malik tried, and failed, to flip them himself. Ethan guided his hands gently, laughing when batter splattered across the counter. Amara leaned against the doorway, her smile brighter than sunlight. "Looks like we've got a chef in training," Ethan teased. Malik grinned. "Only if Daddy helps." For Ethan, those words meant more than any corporate accolade he had ever won. Evenings became sacred. Instead of rushing from one task to another, they slowed down. Some nights they played board games, Malik giggling whenever Ethan accidentally lost. Other nights they sat outside on the porch, listening to the hum of the city as Ethan read Malik bedtime stories, his voice soft but steady. When Malik drifted off, Amara would linger by the doorframe, watching Ethan tuck the blanket carefully around him. Each gentle touch, each whispered goodnight, healed something inside her that had ached for years. "You're good with him," she said one night, when they stepped into the quiet living room. Ethan met her gaze. "I used to think I had to buy the world for him to be proud of me. Turns out all he wanted was me." As days passed, the walls between Ethan and Amara continued to crumble. There were no grand declarations, just steady gestures, Ethan fixing a leaky faucet without complaint, Amara bringing him coffee during his mentoring sessions, Ethan massaging her shoulders after long clinic days. One evening, after Malik had gone to bed, Amara found Ethan on the porch, staring at the stars. She sat beside him, silence wrapping around them. Finally she whispered, "You've changed more than I thought possible." Ethan turned, his voice low. "I didn't change to win you back. I changed because I couldn't bear to be the man who lost you, and Malik twice." Her throat tightened. Slowly she reached for his hand. Their fingers laced, naturally, as if no years had ever pulled them apart. Summer brought their first family trip together. They drove to Savannah for a weekend, Malik bouncing with excitement in the back seat. He wanted to see everything, the riverboats, the cobblestone streets, the candy shops. Ethan carried him on his shoulders when he got tired, and Amara snapped photos that caught both their faces glowing with joy. One evening they sat on the riverbank sharing ice cream, Malik smearing chocolate across his cheeks. "Best day ever," he declared. Ethan kissed the top of his head. "Every day with you is the best, champ." Amara looked at the two of them and thought, this is what wholeness feels like. Back home, their closeness deepened, not in rushed passion, but in slow-burning intimacy. Ethan learned to notice when Amara was weary, taking over household tasks without complaint. Amara learned to let him carry some of the weight, no longer guarding every responsibility out of fear he would fail her again. One night, after Malik had fallen asleep, they sat on the couch with no distractions, no TV, no phones, just quiet conversation that stretched late into the night. Ethan shared memories of his childhood, the fears he never admitted, the loneliness that had once driven him into work's arms. Amara shared her own doubts, the nights she had cried alone after their separation. Their honesty wove them closer than any ceremony could. The biggest proof of their healing was Malik himself. His teacher remarked how much brighter he had become, more confident in class. He talked constantly about my mama and my daddy, drawing pictures of their little family at every opportunity. One evening, he dragged Ethan and Amara onto the living room floor. "Family hug," he demanded, stretching his small arms wide. They laughed, gathering around him in a tight embrace. Malik squealed happily. "See, we fit perfect." And they did. For the first time in years, all three of them fit perfectly together. No gaps, no shadows. The seasons turned, and with them, the rhythm of Ethan, Amara, and Malik's life grew stronger. 1 year after Ethan stepped away from Caldwell Enterprises, the family's home radiated peace. Malik was thriving at his new school, his asthma under control, his joy unshakable. Ethan had become a regular figure at community centers, mentoring young entrepreneurs and quietly funding scholarships. Amara's clinic had grown with new resources, thanks in part to the fundraiser Ethan had hosted months earlier. But what mattered most wasn't the headlines or programs. It was the ordinary shared breakfasts, nightly prayers with Malik, Ethan and Amara laughing over small things. Their empire was no longer one of steel and glass, but of trust and love. One evening, Ethan sat on the porch alone, Malik asleep inside, Amara humming softly in the kitchen. He thought about who he had been, the man who once believed success meant neglect, who let ambition steal him from the people he loved. And he thought about who he was now, a father whose son ran into his arms, a partner whose presence healed wounds, a man who finally understood that forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was freedom. Amara stepped outside, sliding into the chair beside him. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I spent years chasing an empire that crumbled the second I blinked. But the family I almost lost? That's the empire worth guarding." Amara's hand found his. "And this time you won't guard it alone." Though they had once been married, their journey back to each other wasn't sealed by courts or contracts, it was sealed by consistent love. Still, one warm summer afternoon, Malik tugged on Ethan's hand. "Daddy, when are you and Mama going to get married again? For real?" Ethan chuckled, glancing at Amara. She blushed, rolling her eyes. But later that night they talked, not about ceremony or spectacle, but about promise. "If we do this," Amara said, her voice gentle, "it's not for the world, it's for Malik. And for us." Ethan kissed her hand. "Then let's do it our way." And so, months later, in a small garden surrounded by close friends and family, Ethan and Amara renewed their vows. Malik stood between them proudly as their ring-bearer, grinning from ear to ear. It wasn't grandeur that made the day beautiful. It was the intimacy, the redemption. From their journey rose lessons that echoed beyond their family. Forgiveness is strength. Amara learned that forgiveness didn't erase pain, but transformed it into wisdom. She forgave not because Ethan deserved it at first, but because she refused to let bitterness steal her future. Presence is priceless. Ethan discovered that no empire, no amount of wealth, could equal the value of being there when Malik whispered, "Dad." Love is a daily choice. Their story wasn't saved by one grand gesture, but by steady daily decisions, to show up, to stay, to listen, to choose love over ego. As their story closes, Ethan's final reflection speaks not only to Amara and Malik, but also to every listener. Life will test you. It will tempt you to choose ambition over connection, pride over humility, fear over forgiveness. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait until you've lost everything to see what really matters. If you believe family is the true wealth, type "family first love" in the comments. And remember, love is the only empire worth building. That night, Amara tucked Malik into bed while Ethan read the final page of a storybook. Malik's eyes fluttered closed, safe, content, whole. Amara and Ethan lingered at the doorway, their hands brushing together. They shared a quiet smile that spoke volumes. The past had hurt them, but the present healed them, and the future belonged to them. The city outside buzzed on, unaware of the miracle inside their small home. But miracles didn't need headlines. They needed only love, forgiveness, and presence. And in that, Ethan, Amara, and Malik had found their forever.